So today is August 31st, 2018. I'm Morna Gerard and I'm interviewing Roddy Williams, or Sherman Roderick Williams Jr., for Georgia State University's Gender and Sexuality Oral History Project. The interview is taking place at the Georgia State University Library. So Roddy, let's start with, tell me the year that you were born and where you were born.
February 17th, 1972, in Jacksonville, Florida.
And did you grow up in Jacksonville?
Yes, up until 24.
Okay. Can you tell me about your childhood, like your family, your parents, siblings, all
Sure.
that?
I had two older sisters. My mom and dad divorced actually when I was one, but he was in the military, and mom would read me some of the letters, and he was so much wanting a boy that he was even some of the letters when my mom was first pregnant, her showing, he would even call the baby Sherman before they knew even what gender it was. So that's how much he wanted a boy, and of course it was going to be named after him. So believe me, it's as narcissistic or whatever as it comes. But so he, so my older sister, who's 10 years older, she's born. 7 years later, my other sister was born, and mom tells me the story that, again, they were continually wanting a boy. And mom tells me that back in the day when Reader's Digest was a woman's Bible, that there was some short article about how to up your chances of having a male child was literally, she said, when the sweat is still on your face after sex, is to go and lay on the floor and cross your legs and put your legs up against the wall.
I remember my grandmother telling me this.
Okay.
She probably read the same article.
And so that, and then I was born, but that's just a funny little extra that it was something that my mom was worth trying just because she really wanted a boy. But yeah, unfortunately, as soon as less than a year after I was born, my mom and dad divorced.
After all that trying, and then once he got a boy, that was like, geez.
But so yes, being raised by a single mom, dad who was just honestly he was a deadbeat. But my mom, again, she was very protective of family, so she never said one bad word, and so he never paid child support. I mean, we're talking up until I forget he was backlogged like $30,000 or something insane, and the judge was like, Miss Williams, just say the word, and he goes, we put him away. And she's like, I can't. She could never do it. Every time she was taken to court, she couldn't put him away. We didn't know any of this. She kept it all hidden from us. So we thought Dad was a good guy. I said good guy, but I mean, helping us. But then we saw my mom work 3 jobs.
So what did she do?
She worked for a car rental place part-time, for Trailways and Greyhound. Trailways was before she worked for Trailways for many, many years. And then she would do at the airport, because we lived close. She would do I think it was like a Holiday Inn bar, literally. It was one of those really hole-in-the-wall kind of things. And even when, and growing up, all I knew was that I needed to make really good grades in order to get to go to college. This is preached in from my mom. So I thought C's were the death of me. It was not something I would ever try and be happy with, and so that was a contention of mine, to make really good grades, and that was my kind of driving force very, very young, was to make my mom proud, and that's all I cared about.
Did you have a close relationship with your mom?
Yeah, completely. Having older sisters, both of them dropped out, and both got pregnant, so this was, and we teasingly say, I said, you two were just, y'all were vixens, and y'all were heathens, so I couldn't do any wrong. I mean, literally, I was like the baby boy, mother and mom's, So my sisters completely kind of despised me growing up in a way, because I just couldn't do any wrong. I mean, they had curfews. I'd come in, and my mom's like, as long as you call by 12 at one time, I think in 11th grade, up to 11th grade, it was or around 10th, 11th grade, as long as you're out, if you're out, make sure you call by midnight, and if you're all right, then you can stay till 1. But that was the rule. But my sisters hated it because they could never have anything like that.
That's funny.
Yeah.
But did you get on well with them once you grew up?
Yeah, completely. In fact, it was mostly I was the little brother that had to be the third wheel on many, many dates, believe me. My mom, and it's just because my mom worked all the time, so I couldn't be there by myself up to a certain year. yeah, so there's many, that third wheel in the back seat, in drive-throughs. And believe me, in drive-through theaters, it was always unique because, all the depending on the movie you're watching, of course, you hear the sound. But they didn't think about there's X-rated movies at certain much around. So as a kid, I'm turned back into the back seat, and my sisters, many, many times I remember them reaching back, going, grabbing me, trying to make me turn around, because that's all I was watching, was trying to watch the screen way over there. So yeah, those were the kind of misfits or whatever that I was around my sisters, just a pain in the butt, because I was, and then of course when they would throw like parties, when my mom would be at work, I was the one that they would have to kiss butt, because I would tell them. They knew it.
That's great.
Yeah, so a lot of bargaining.
Are they all still in Jacksonville?
Yeah, they all live about a rock's throw from each other, 5 miles from each other. Another one lives about 10 miles from each other. And then they used to be in Jacksonville. Now they moved to Callahan, which is more in the country, more out in the country. But yeah, they still all live within 15 miles of each other.
And you said when you lived close to the airport when you were younger?
Yeah. Growing up, it was Jacksonville Airport wasn't too far away, so it was so it was just there. Yeah.
When you were a kid, did you have any like big aspirations, or what you wanted to be when you grew up?
What's funny is it truly was about just pleasing my mom so blindly that it wasn't even an option for. Even again, I was taking AP courses, and I remember not even really thinking what I wanted to go into. And I'm reading books about average incomes within the first 5 years of graduating, and then I was trying to use that as some premise for desire. And so I read these economists that and I really read into it. I'm like, okay, maybe that's what I want to be. And I realized it's so everything you're reading and thinking about is 5 and 10 years in the future, and that just didn't interest me at all. I love math, and I love sociology and all that, the interactions, why people do the things they do. That really drew a lot of interest for me. But outside of that, no, there wasn't any particular field. Not because my first job, even before I think it was only 2 weeks, 16 years old, just turned 16. I worked at a frame shop in the mall, the local mall, and Deck the Walls was the chain that I worked at. And being very young in that field, it grew me. I grew up I matured very fast, because trying to convince someone to spend $1,000 in framing, if you're not reputable or come across that way, you're not going to make the sale. And so that's something I learned very, very quickly. Just as a little side note, because this is so peculiar, but my name, with it being Roderick in the middle, Roderick has had a connotation of being black, like Roderick Williams. So when I turned my application into this family, it's a family-owned business, she didn't call me back within 2 or 3 weeks, and finally I called, and I was like, I was just wondering if you filled the position yet. And she said, we're still looking. And so then I finally walked over it, and I finally drove over there and said, I was just wondering if you had time yet to do interviews or anything. And she said, certainly. And she goes, did you put your application in? And I explained to her who I was. She didn't tell me this until a year later, but she said she didn't call me because my name sounded black.
Wow.
And she just said, and I won't say at the core of it she's racist, but what for her, because of the business, she said, it's not something that already for someone young, I was already taking a chance of saying, okay, I really, you come across very well. It's just something I could see in the business. But as she said, it just wouldn't, for our field, it wouldn't work at the time. So it was just a weird little thing that I had to kind of grasp in my head. Because at the same time, years later when I was in college, one of my roommates was black. And he would go out and put applications in to try and get jobs. And so I felt such kind of that white guilt that I was paying his rent sometimes under the table, because I was like, I don't want him to, my other roommate would have thrown him out in a heartbeat. And I was giving him money so that he could come across as if he was being responsible. But it was totally because I felt guilty. Because he would go out and put applications in and not get the jobs. And I think that I could probably put an application in and get a job. And so I just really felt, there was a lot of that kind of guilt that I would carry with me in the earlier years.
Did you see a lot of racism living down in Jacksonville?
There was I went to school, middle school during the segregation. So at the time my mom gave me the choice. She said, we can do like your friends do, and we can lie about your address, because they had figured that system out really fast, so that you can go to Highland, which would have been a close middle school. And she goes, but my mom sat me down. She goes, but you're going to get out of the education system what you're going to get. It doesn't matter if you're going to be put in this black school or this white school. She was very adamant about that. Like, it's going to be me. It's going to be on me. And so I was like, then no, we're not going to lie. And so I was bussed over to a 70% black for my 8th and 9th grade year. And in fact, in 9th grade, I was even student council president of a black. It was kind of amazing. But yeah, no, I loved the experience. There was a couple of days where they would have like a race day, and it was where they were just taking shots, fights would break out, and it was definitely black on white kind of thing. But I kind of steered clear a little bit because even though I was part of the nerds grouping, because all my classes were advanced, but I also played soccer and then played tennis, and so the jocks, that kind of gave it a little bit of it kind of evened it out, and so I wasn't picked on very much, and I definitely saw that as a benefit because all some of my friends who were just completely nerds and stuff, it wasn't quite as nice for them. Yeah.
What kind of subjects did you enjoy most?
Yeah, I did. Honestly, I loved math. Accounting, absolutely my worst ever. I hated anything like that. It's odd that I loved math, but sociology I loved. Physics was somewhat difficult, but I enjoyed it. It was actually more challenging for me. I had to put more time into understanding some of the aspects of it. But that was about. It was really, again, and it's so funny, it's almost a blur sometimes when I think of it, because all I cared about was my mom making sure I wasn't going to bring home any C's. That was 6 weeks of restriction if I brought home C's. So I think I brought home 1 within my high school from 7th through 12. Yeah, that was only to please my mom. It was total blinders, so.
When you were younger, were there any people or events that you think might be influential in your life?
Well, to be honest, again, it was more my mom and learning, like for instance, even as a kid, I would hear my mom working 3 jobs, or at least the times that I would see her, we could sometimes even go a week, but she finally figured out that she can't deal with that. She can't live with that, and so she would wake me up every morning at 4 because she would want to see and talk to me, hear my voice, she said. And so I would be sitting sometimes as a kid over a cup of coffee at 4 in the morning because she had to leave at 4:30. And she would just sit there asking me how my day was, really just wanting to know me or wanting to know how I was doing, because our schedules were, the schedules were so much that I would, she would be so tired and ready for 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock to go to bed when she would, and I was a little bit not, I would be going to bed around that time, but it couldn't be a conversation. And so I remember many mornings just sitting across the table with her, sometimes with my hand over the coffee cup, just like, and her asking me all these questions. And then even later in middle school and high school, when I got a job, our schedules really were messed up because literally I could go to work until 10. She would definitely be in bed already. And then she'd be up before I got up in the mornings. And again, that whole cycle would go a whole week. And so again, I learned it was going to be the same thing. I was going to be up at 4 o'clock with her. It's been that. And it also benefited me in a way because having 2 older sisters and 1 bathroom between us, Mom, I absolutely knew that she would make sure to wake me up prior just so I could get in there before the hairspray and the curling iron started.
Now, you went on to do picture framing
Totally.
later. So, did you get that job because you wanted to be a picture framer, or because it seemed like you saw the job ad and you thought this is something?
It was where I put in my application in 6 different places that day. What interested me afterwards, initially, as soon as I got into it, was I wasn't thinking the art side of it, to be honest. always had an appreciation for artists. Loved museums at the time, but it didn't occur to me until actually once I was really dived into it that wow, this is exactly what I would love. I mean, every single job was new. I mean, people bring in their pieces of artwork from the kids' paintings to like where we put on gloves because it would be like a Van Gogh pencil sketch from his early years. So that job in itself was completely thrilling, and that's actually why I worked under a master framer. It was my first job, and so for 5 years I worked for them, and it was 4 years. I worked under a master framer for those 4 years, and it was incredible.
That's a great sort of
it's a trade, and it was something where people were like, "Oh yeah, this will be." And even when the onslaught of computerized mat cutting, some of the industry took a hit because everything could be computerized and mats can be cut. But there's so much outside of that is definitely hands-on when it comes to the industry. So at least I felt and was told very much so. This is a trade you can carry throughout. Until if everything was to fall on the wayside, you could have your framing business, and so that's what I've always maintained in the back.
That's kind of great that somebody was willing to take on a youngster and actually like train them, train. It's not just like dog's body, like
totally.
It's like you're actually.
And I think because he was at the time he was like 54, Ron, who I trained under, and here I was this young 16, 17-year-old, and I remember many times that he was somewhat overweight, and so he would, because of the size of the table, he would get in this position where his weight would be on the table slightly so that he could rest his feet a little bit. And I just remember this vision where I'd always stand right next to him for hours watching him do mat cutting and stuff. And he would be teaching me the whole entire time. But it was just a funny, iconic kind of image of him kind of slightly leaned into this table because it would rest kind of his top part of his body. And then he could kind of show me mat cutting and some other stuff. But it was kind of, it's funny that I haven't really thought of that in a while. But yeah, I was very lucky to be under that kind of.
Throughout, like while you were growing up, were you aware of your own sexuality?
I was not. I would play house and doctor and nurse with my one neighbor, which was a girl, and the next door neighbor, which was a boy, but nothing sexual. So it was all very innocent. And then, but it was where I had like pictures of this Victoria's Secret's model, Stephanie Seymour. I thought whatever. So I had a huge poster of her on my wall, and I think my first experience where it was questionable was probably. I was pretty young. I found my mom loved Magnum PI, and I just remember her having some magazine or something, and it had him in his short shorts or whatever, and Hawaiian shirt open. And I remember there was an inflection of where I thought it was just the feelings or whatever. I was thought that he was very that he was hot, and so there was a bizarre little.
How old were you when that happened?
I'd say I would have been still in because I always had the bedroom by myself since my two sisters were in the other bedroom.
No wonder they hated you.
Oh yeah, I got it. It would have been middle school. Yeah, it would have been still. I was very young, so it would have been maybe 6th grade, maybe. Yeah.
Were there any kids at school who you thought might be gay?
No, I wasn't thinking in those terms. But I was thinking, what's funny is I probably had a fear of where my feelings were coming from. So I made a point. I wouldn't relay or do any of the kind of bullying, but I was far too young or too naive at the time to feel a need to say anything or to protect in that kind of way. But I made sure I didn't hang out with the effeminate ones that were kind of effeminate or whatever. And I'm sure that was a kind of a defense mechanism in myself that was like, okay, I'm not going to be questioned if I don't hang out with that person or this person. Because definitely in the advanced classes in the nerd kind of realm, there was the tendency sometimes is because you're dealing with other things, that they would sometimes excel, and that's kind of where I always thought in my head, like some of these guys must, in my afterthought I should say, looking back thinking, wow, these probably excelled maybe for some of the same reasons I did. I thought I was having to make up for something because I was not going to be the normal child that my mom wanted me to be. When talking to my mom, she said even as a kid, for instance, if herself or if someone in my presence said, wow, look at that girl, she's got a weird girl with the short hair. Now something as benign as that, I would defend the person. And I said, that person with short, she probably looks around and says, look at that woman with the long hair. And so I would always be devil's advocate for my mom, and she said she remembers even as a very young kid I would do that. And so mom was very astute as far as not wanting to be judgmental and knowing that I was going to defend or whatever and take the opposite side of whatever it was that she was going to.
Did she ever have an inkling that you were gay?
She said no. She said no. Because I played the whole the girlfriend in college, first year in college. In fact, the only reason why we broke up was she had a teaching job in Ohio, and she wanted me to engage her before she left because we were together for almost 2 years, and it was a long night. Let me just say that. If I had to finally come to terms that I couldn't explain why I couldn't love her, why I didn't love her. I will say we were the couple that, and she was a Hooters waitress. She was a TA. What's funny is she was a TA as well as a Hooters waitress. And so it was the polar of what you would think maybe even that I myself would be relationship-wise in. But I will say it was incredible sex for 2 years. It was us getting the Kama Sutra as old as that Kama Sutra, but it was like joy sex. I'm sorry, the modern version of Kama Sutra stuff, page after page, and we would just have immense fun over those 2 years. And so, but when she was given this job and was leaving, she almost wanted me to be serious and be enough to say that I loved her and she was the only one, and I couldn't not lie to her. I couldn't lie to her anymore or whatever. And so it took 6 hours, but literally we started at 10 at night talking, where literally it was moments of all I wanted to do was her to hit me for some reason because I thought that would make me feel better. So there was times when I was putting my hands to my side and just clenching my eyes, saying just punch me as hard as you can, because I couldn't explain it in a way of why I couldn't love her and I couldn't engage her, and I felt really bad because I was really breaking her heart. I could tell. But through 6 hours of conversation, we ended up drinking coffee and donuts at Dunkin' Donuts at 4 in the morning when it was finally over, and she and then it was fine. We went our separate ways. I think about 5 or 6 years ago, I looked her up, and she's lesbian. She's a lesbian.
There you go.
And my mom, of course, tells me, we joke about it, that I fell in love with her because when sometimes we'd go to, my mom would cook dinner for me and some of my college buddies because they were away from home, and we could just drive 45 minutes to my mom's and she would have this really great dinner. And when Tammy would come with us, she wasn't afraid because she was kind of one of the boys. She would eat the last pork chop, and she didn't care. It wasn't a matter of a boy or girl thing. If she was hungry, she was going to eat it. And that, for some reason, that was an odd turn on for me, that she was so independent and so confident in herself that she was not going to let someone tell her that she's not ladylike for not eating this last pork chop. And oddly enough, that I reminisce about it, but that was definitely a point of interest for me, that she was that type. So okay, it's like her confidence was enough for me to. But yeah, oddly enough, here was a Hooters waitress, me questioning things. It was shortly thereafter that I did have my first gay experience. And it was working in the frame when I was working at, and even after the owner came to me and said, you might want to be careful of this one. I mean, and he was trying to point out that the client may be gay. I was very naive and green, so I just was very much like, it's just another client to me. I didn't think, and in my head and heart, I thought, I have not met a gay person. I really thought at the time I had not met a gay person yet. And it was, it was just a guy who was, he brought in really beautiful pieces. He didn't mind there was always no budget kind of thing. And so it allowed for my creativity to really get crazy. And he, of course, was happy to pay. And this was going on for about 6 months, and he dropped a lot of money in 6 months. And then he was asking my boss if we ever do any home installations or whatever. And so my boss was like, we do. and he approached me and just said, "Look, Dan wants you to go, and he's going to bring in 3 pieces. We're going to frame them, and then he wants you to install them in his new. He's done an addition on his house." And I was fine with it. I had done 2 installs prior, but these were at this Amelia Island, and it was where literally the wife gave me the key, and so I had to drive to Amelia Island with these huge canvas beach scenes, were so generic and so whatever. But it was in their summer home, and so installing those with no one in the house in this huge mansion, and I just literally unlock, hang these things, lock it back, and I'm out of there. But with him, he was there. He would try. I remember I was such a Boy Scout. He tried to give me a tip after I hung the pictures, and I was absolutely not taking any of the tip. He said, "Can I at least take you to for coffee or something?" And then I agreed to that. And so from the coffee talk, it went. He wanted just to go to dinner. And I remember we went to Hooters for dinner. Yes. He was smart enough, and then we talked about it afterwards. He was smart enough to keep my defenses down by me going to that place, and he was 11 years older, so it was a little bit, quite a bit older. But I remember drinks were being sent to our table, to the table we were eating at, and he had some of his friends were there, but they were way up in the corner, just kind of like cheering him on, I guess, or whatever. For her, this is as I look back and like, you're 36 years old. Why does he need his friends are there like cheering him on? But it turns out he was very quiet and an introvert. He was way, way, way up at the time with AT&T, way up there. And so, it's just not something it would come easy. Relationships were not something for easy for him. But he was I will have to say, my first experience was nothing like some of my friends' and stuff experiences. He literally called and he had a housekeeper and had her get the fire going, and set a bottle of champagne by the fire in the thing. And she had, the housekeeper had laid out this cushiony thing or whatever kind of thing right in front of the fireplace, because he called ahead of time and had it all set up for her. And then she was gone by the time we got there.
Wow, he's romancing.
Yeah, it was nice. It wasn't. He wasn't overt about sex things. Again, he knew I was very. This was my first experience, and that it was going to really freak me out if he did anything. I remember literally when we got done with dinner, we're walking to the car, and he said, "I have a question for you," and I was like, "Sure." And he goes, "Can we sit in your car for a second?" So I sat down. He sat on the passenger side, and then he looked over and said, "Have you ever been with?" And then he said, "A man." And I remember then my head went forward, and I don't remember. Everything was a sound, was a just tunnel, and he could either tell he was going to freak me out or I was going to react in a wild way. But he said, "Would you like to?" And then I just remember not looking him in the face and just saying, "Yes." So I followed him to his place, and but no, he was nice. It was a 6-month relationship, 7 month. But would be the epitome of a sugar daddy, and that I was way too independent. He would buy me these. I'm in college. He's buying me these $300 shirts. And I remember getting so angry with him. So I would return the shirts, get him money to buy him stuff for his house that he would never think to do it, or like a coffee press. I mean, some of the stuff that he was really wanting, but he would never room to buy. And so I was out there, I did that kind of exchange, and he was getting his feelings hurt because he thought I didn't like him because I was doing that. I was like, no, this is as big of a string attached as they come. And he didn't know how to express himself other than that, because that was the realm of his relationship. He's this rich older guy, and he would always be interested in the younger guys.
And I think a lot of young men would love that.
Yeah, I mean, now when I listen to some stories and stuff, but it was an odd thing. I was either the way I was raised, there was something about that was absolutely going to not be the case. And I ended it when we went. He said, "Oh, I'm going to test drive this car today. I want you to come along and see how. You just give me some pointers how do you like it or not." And it was like a Millennia. I forget the name of the car, but it's called a Millennia. So it was a brand new Millennia car. And he said, "Oh, you give it a drive. You give it a drive." And so it's me, the sales guy, and then Dan is sitting in the back seat. And he's like, how do you like it? How do you like it? I was like, oh, Dan, you're going to love this car. And he goes, good, because it's yours. And then I slammed the brakes on so hard that the guy, the car guy's clipboard flew up into the into the dashboard, and I slammed the brakes on and parked it, got out of the car, and I was like, no, hell, it's not. I was like, so I'm not driving this car another second. So he had to get in the car and drive, and then we had a big conversation, and then I broke up with him about a week later. But I really left him saying, look, you need you to find you a young boy who has nothing going for him, because what you have to provide and give him is very nice. I mean, you're a nice guy, but that's just not me. And so we stayed in touch for about a year, or about 6 months after that, and then nothing. Then a year later, I just kind of looked him up, or whatever. I talked to some of his friends. He got a young boy who took him for everything, broke his heart, did everything, and I had nothing for him as far as like consolation. But it was just that was going to happen. But I felt really bad for him. But,
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was my first experience.
So did it feel natural to you, like straight away, that this is who I am?
Physically, totally, everything. It was. He had in one of his coffee shop, in one of his books, they said like the 100 most influential gays or whatever. It was some like hardback book, and I literally was flipping through this thing, and it's just such a fun experience that. I would see a doctor, and they would show these people in their current occupations, and I flipped it through, and there would be a doctor in his doctor, and I was like, okay, so he's gay, and so I'm asking. This is a book of 100, and it's clearly these are only gay people. But I had to ask him at least 10 or 20 times. Okay, no. So she's gay, and he would be saying, yes, these are all gay. These are all, and I'm like, it really was astounding to me that these were normal people in these normal jobs that were gay. It was inspiring when I remember so many times asking them, because I just couldn't believe it. Everywhere. I just couldn't believe it. So, but that was definitely a pinnacle point. I remember very much so that, okay, so there could be gay people that that look normal and act normal, and so I just remember that was very pinnacle for me.
Now, how old were you at this point?
I would have been 21.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you come out to your mom quickly, or?
No. In fact, I stayed in the closet, and it wasn't until, and she even met this when I moved here. She met this guy. She met Robin, and he was, 6'4", 6'5". He was big burly guy, but gentle, super nice, and so he was my roommate. So when Mom came to visit, she met him and thought it was nice, and we did the typical Atlanta things of all. But she had no clue. She still had no clue. And we afraid we defagged. We said we defagged the house and everything, so nothing was except for we. My niece is very, very young at the time, and so she came. It was always my mom and my niece traveling together. And so my niece, of course, is curious, and she sees little things, and so she went to go hit play on the video. The TV wasn't on, but so the VHS starts, and I immediately hit the eject button. So when it ejects, you see the title. And my niece was at the time was just learning really like words and stuff, and so I think it was said bigger is better or whatever it was called. And so I hear her start to say it, and I remember like the hottest internal, my body just turned immediately completely hot, and I just knew I just blew my cover from her saying that. And then I turned her on to something else, and so everything was fine, but it was quite an experience. I thought that was going to be the moment of that she was going to break. But Mom came 2 or 3 other times and visited. Finally, my older sister, because they would always be asking, have you found a girl yet in Atlanta? I even did the Heart to Heart program, which is, I guess, in big cities, when you move there, they really go after you aggressively to set you up on dates. I even did that thinking, because as a note, when I moved here, I was bisexual. I was still coming to that whole terms. And so I considered myself bisexual, and that's the only reason why I did this whole Heart to Heart. But my roommates at the time, I didn't know them. I was becoming friends with them as having moved here. They were they were gay, and they knew that I was gay, and they knew that they were going to let me come to that term, however it was. But they were telling me, I was like, why do they keep calling me? All you have to do is tell them that you're gay, and I will stop calling, I promise. And I was like, oh, okay. So I just told them that, and finally they ended. Because I felt nervous, because I would always get these calls from them trying to set me up on these dates with women. So Mom would come and visited, and finally my older sister approached me and said, have you met the right girl or guy? And that's all she did, was say that, the or guy. And I looked at her in the face, and she said, oh, she was me and Kathy, know, the sisters. They said, we know, Mom doesn't. And I was like, well, you cannot tell Mom. I'm going to tell her when I'm ready. Now, this is the same sister, my older sister, who really had a, she would like to see some misery on my part because I had it too good as a kid. I was always the star. It was always going to be about me. And so I didn't know at the time that it would turn out this way, but she immediately went to my mom and told, even after I begged her, and I told her, I was like, you cannot tell Mom, I need to sit down with her. There's steps that will help this whole process be easier. I said, you can't do this. She did it immediately. So I just flew back from Atlanta, and I talked to Mom on the phone at least 3 or 4 times, because I talked to her almost every day. And so it was then I talked to my sister, and she finally admitted to me. And she wasn't going to tell me at first, but so here I am talking to Mom. She knows I'm gay, and I'm not telling her anything yet. And then finally, I was planning another visit. It was only about 2 weeks away, because between my birthday and my sister's birthday, we try and kind of squeeze it together sometimes. And because Jacksonville's not very far away from here, it was only a 5.5 hour drive. And so I was going back within 3 weeks. Came back, and that's when I told my mom. But Mom then told me that the stuff that my sister put her through, because they went to breakfast the morning after I left, and so she tells her in like a Denny's, and so it's her and my mom, because my mom always made us, when I would come visit, she made us do a Sunday breakfast always, no matter what our schedules were. We had to come together for Sunday breakfast. And so, and normally I would be home, but they sometimes would go out. So all 3 of them went out, and Pam told her. And Pam read some really stupid stuff online, and she would make my mom say out loud that she was proud of her kid's son. She said, this is the stuff you have to say, or, this will help. And so this is the kind of stuff my sister ignorantly read. And she goes, what are you talking about? My mom was getting aggravated. She was like, what are you talking about? Of course I love him. Of course I love my son. And he goes, no, you have to say, I love my gay son. And she kept saying, my mom was telling me this, that she was adamant that she had to say it out loud. It had to be vocal. She had to say out loud that she loves her gay son. And so Mom finally broke down and told her, like, what are you talking about? Of course I love him. And then she made my mom continue on until she finally said, I love my gay son. But that was the kind of stuff my sister put her through. And and I felt bad for Mom, but Mom's only thing was she didn't want to dig up why I didn't all this time or whatever. She would just ask me questions like, well, was Robin? She was like, was Robin your partner? And I was like, yes, we broke up. And she was, well, I thought he had really good taste, because we're the place where. And I said, well, you don't remember Dan, because she never knew about Dan. But I was going to had box seats to tennis tournaments, and it's because he bought them. And there would be tickets for me and my college buddies, so we were in box seats, and that was, and so Mom knew I was going there, but she didn't make the correlation of like cost or any of that. She knew I went to Sade's concert, almost front row with them, because again with Dan, and so she would ask me questions like, well, then and then I was explaining to her about the Dan situation, but only in the sense that he was older. She didn't like that. That made her nervous. But I told her that I was very careful. I was going to, that. She was okay. Well, just so you know, like I would love you no matter what. And she made me very clear, and I absolutely never had a question whether or not she would. In fact, I was more mad at myself for not, because unfortunately I did cheat her out of the whole spectrum of conversations. When we talk almost every day or every other day. I mean, not to be able to even go near that part of the conversation, it really did cheat her out of a lot of experiences I was having because of it. So I did feel completely guilty from it. And again, I had no reason to think that she would think anything.
Sounds like she's such a great mom that she loves her son.
Totally. And my sister, again, with my dad, knowing that my mom and dad divorced when I was 1, I didn't really know my dad very much. I mean, it was only like the year, and I was less than a 1-year-old. My older sister, though, she got to experience my dad for 10-something years. And because of that, she had a relationship with my dad. And it was very much of a daughter and hate the mom situation, because you and dad divorce thing. My mom got a lot of flack from my older sister. And so my sister was very close to my dad. My dad didn't live very far away. Which, by the way, my dad married 8 times. 8 times. He had his looks and his charisma until he died, unfortunately. So it just was. And by the way, and I look like a complete identical to my father. My mom's like, we jokingly, she says, you have your father's outsides and you got your mom's insides, because But yeah, so he wasn't some star character but my sister wanted to continue a relationship with him, so she of course relished in the idea to be able to come to him and tell him that his only son is gay. And so my dad didn't take it well. He didn't want, and we'd only seen each other maybe a handful of times, maybe 10 times over the years. And so it wasn't a big break for me. I was totally fine. And then him and his wife, number 8, moved close to Fernandina Beach. There was a bar right up him. He was definitely a drinker and shot pool. He was one of those. And so he would go up to the local pub. Well, it wasn't advertised as being a gay bar. It wasn't. It was very men drinking. And it wasn't gay, but the owners were gay. The bar itself was not a gay bar, but the owners were gay. And so he's always got, everyone knows him as soon as he walks in the bar. Hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. He sits his elbows to the bar and then carries on conversations with the bartender. And then that's when he started to learn that, these guys are gay guys and they're all right. And they would share sometimes barbecue stories. And so my dad's a big time barbecue. Each year he would go to a local veterans group where he would cook for like 400. I mean, so he'd have all these barbecue grills going at the same time. He was into that, smoking the mesquite chips and all that stuff. So he was a master barbecuer, and they would share stories. Here it is, masculine, And so my dad got to see that side of it, and he completely then was totally fine with it, because his first take on it was, of course he is. He was raised by your mother. That's what his remarks to my older sister was. Thinking it was freaking that, trying to make her feel guilty. And my mom was asking me, then she would question. I'm like, Mom, please, do not even question. Don't even think this kind of thing. This is not the way it goes. Only because Mom in the early years, she really did. She made me do the Big Brother program because she wanted a man as a person in my life. I did that 3 or 4 years and I hated it. She forced me to go to the things and I'm like, Mom, they take me to the same park. We go to the same ice cream shop. I mean, these guys that were trying to be part of it, they just didn't have
the imagination.
Imagination. It was the same thing. I'm like, and that's all it was. Is I would be sitting on the swing eating ice cream for like 2 or 3 hours. Nothing exciting. So the program, and prior to that, my mom had me go do weekend visits with my dad. She really would push it. Again, she wouldn't say a bad thing about him. But and his way of trying to make up for it was, as a kid, he would give me $50, and I would be. But then Mom said, when I would come in, I would run straight to her and just hand her the $50. And she's like, no, your father wants you to have this. And I'm like, well, then I want you to have this. And then so I would give it to her because I would know bills had to be. Even as a young kid, I understood like kind of the whole way that kind of stuff worked. Not knowing the time he was trying to buy my love, and Mom was trying to be. So those were some of the stuff that was starting to build up where I was understanding, okay, he's doing it out of guilt. He feels guilty. And most of the time, he's totally ripping on me. Like as a kid, my pants were kind of low. My dad definitely was the old school racist kind of thing. Connotations, some of his Americanisms were very racist. I would go fishing with them. some of the names of the fish slangs were very racist. Everyone was, even though back in the war days, Charlie meant like an Asian or that he called everyone Charlie, black, or if you were not white, you were called Charlie, and that was his demeaning way of any blacks or white, anything outside of white. It was Charlie. There's two Charlies over there. I bet did Charlie help you at the store? That was his conversation. So that was kind of a little branch of that. And Mom wasn't. She worked around a bunch of a lot of black women, and they embraced me as a kid. I'd go and of course get all the big pickups and hugs and kisses and stuff from and adoration from them, just as a mother, their mother, and to my mom. But so yeah, and then I'm kind of going off board.
No.
So yeah, that was just a little into it. So with my sister telling my dad that Hero was gay, he finally was fine. He was open to the idea that, of course, me of us maybe coming together. I really, to be honest, at the time, I'm an adult. I was like, Dad, I can always use a friend. I just can't be we've crossed over on the father thing. You can't really tell me what I'm doing now. I'm living is wrong, or you can't do this kind of stuff. It's just not going to work. And it was a comparison to the whole, your pants are too baggy, you're wearing your hat too low. I mean, he would just ride me on these weekends that I would, and it really was just his way of critiquing the way Mom was raising me. That's all it was.
Mm-hmm.
Me not knowing at the time, it just was like, why is he doing this? I mean, he would call me every name in the book because of maybe my pants were, whatever, my pants were baggy. It was at a time, kids who did that, I mean, it was just not as extreme as it is sometimes today, but it was just like the style stuff. So we finally were able to go to we all went to a barbecue place of all things. I went by myself with my younger sister, with my older sister, and with my dad, and then his current wife. She was very nice. She was quiet and country, and he talked boisterous about things that had gone on, and then that was it. And there was years of nothing. I mean, I wouldn't. We had no crossovers except for maybe one or two family funerals. He came from a family of 8 or 9 brothers and sisters, and so a couple of them were favorite aunts and uncles of mine. So of course I would go to their funerals and stuff, and so we would just kind of see each other in passing. It was a little bit bizarre with him passing last year. He was diagnosed with cancer, and then the family reached out and said, Roddy wants to see you, talking about to me. I was like, okay, well, I'll come down. And he had some chemo that had burned his esophagus, so he couldn't talk. And so what was really bad is because when I went to go visit him then, he couldn't talk to me. And I could tell it in his eyes that all the stuff he was just wanting to say to me. I will have to say it was really painful to watch, but all I could do is stand by the side of the bed and hold his hand, and he's just looking at me with his big eyes and expressing whatever it was, but that's all I could do was express it through his eyes. And so and he had this, I had gone down to visit him, and he wasn't in any kind of critical care or whatever. Flew back, and then it was literally just 2 days later they said, we need you, he wants to see you, and the hospice says it's soon. So I made my plans, came 3 days later, so it was about 5 or 6 days. That night, after I left, he died that night. In fact, there was even, when I was there with him and saw him, he was at home in the front living room, the whole hospice bed set up. And so I went and saw him, and again, he didn't really talk to me. Felt really bad about it. When I went home, and I was flying out the very next morning, he died that morning. And I was on my way to the airport when they called to let me know that he passed.
Wow.
So I was very grateful and happy that I was able to actually to see him in that way. When I went to the actual funeral, he, again from the 8th wife, and maybe from a previous wife, I looked so much like my father that to see these grandchildren, all they could do was and they would just but their mouths were open, and all they do is want to stare at me the whole time, and I felt really horrible because I did look so much like my dad, and I know that just it made no sense to them that I was there. I could tell, even when the mothers were trying to push their faces, like stop staring, I just saw these little faces staring at me, like, with their mouths open, and I've had two of them run on both sides of me to hug me and not know me. Yeah, so it's bizarre, and to see and then of course because I'm a junior, to see my name on the thing was another kind of a experience, and to see how country people deal with like gay, because they had this had my sister's name, and then in parentheses the surviving my sister's husband, that was in parentheses, and then it's like for mine it was, I know that these people thought it was probably a misprint, so it would say my name and then Will. And I was joking with my mom and said, they'll probably try and rationalize it and say it must be short for Wilma or something, because so that was just a funny experience. But they were a very nice family. They were thankful, but and again, it really it did play to the idea that I knew my dad was very gentle, rough around the edges kind of thing, and he didn't have his head right all the time. So
he was who he was.
Yeah, totally.
Looking back, when you first sort of became sexually active as a gay man, were you concerned about AIDS?
No, I didn't know anyone. It was especially in Jacksonville, kind of a small country thinking. And I wasn't involved in any kind of AIDS activist at all. I had my first job was with my first corporate job, because that was the kind of branch, was when I got out of high school, was I had to go into find a business. It couldn't be just framing anymore. I had to do something as and again, blinders on from school and my mother. So I got a job with GE.
What were you doing with them?
GE Capital. I was with their the retail financing services end of it, their credit cards, and actually I got that because they did a job fair at the University of North Florida where I was going to college, and so.
Before you get there, you went to college for how long?
For only 2 years.
And then you dropped out.
Yep.
Was there a reason that you wanted to?
No. Actually, it was at the time, to be honest, I didn't have a lot of direction. I still was battling with the whole idea of Tammy was leaving, and that's when I was starting to really confront emotionally the whole what was happening, because I was not I couldn't explain it to. I had no gay friends. I absolutely had no one to really at all talk with. And my experiences with after that with Dan was, again, my requirements was that we couldn't do anything out in public. Poor guy. I sit there and think about it, and he bent to any beck and call. I was like, I can't. No one can see me out in public, because who knows? Who knows if it could come back to my mom. My mom worked at Mayo Clinic. She actually worked there for 25 years, and that was Mayo Clinic happened to be close to Riverside, over where Dan lived, but Riverside and the beach. All over there, and so I was just so deathly afraid that someone's going to see me. I don't know why, really, but so yeah, none of that ever came out. But I was not there was nothing about AIDS that I had any kind of correlation to. I was involved with tennis and was the only outside kind of activity that I did with at the university. Then when I got the job with GE, they're the ones who transferred me up here. They promoted me. I was only doing customer service. They had a phone bank in Jacksonville, Florida. But they had these management development programs that you could get involved with, and they would then send you to every 6 months or so, they would send you to a new location. And so I started the program in Jacksonville. I kind of should have known it was not going to be my cup of tea, because they pulled me behind closed doors and were explaining to me how deals could be closed on the golf course, and that they were going to pay for me to have golf lessons, so that I could start it was so white man American, like whatever, that my stomach turned kind of thing. And it was also, I was hired on with a good 4 or 5 other people, 3 black women, and one was her and I. We did very well. I mean, we were very much leaders in some of our the groupings, and then we both posted for this position, and then I got it. I was distressed for a little while, and I actually had to set up a meeting with the vice president at the time, because I couldn't come to terms of why he selected me, and I was so afraid that it was because I was white. And so I remember going into the meeting, and you really you had that special circumstances really to get time, and I only was given like 15 minutes with the guy, and I had to ask. I point blank, I had my questions ready, but the first one was, "Why did you choose me over Latasha?" which was this woman, and then he was explaining that there was 2 projects within the 6 month that they asked for volunteers to help steer or help head, and I was the first to say I'll do it. That doesn't bother me at all. And so he was just able to say, he goes, like, if I right now asked all the executive branch people here who they know that's in the front line, your name would be one of the ones that comes up. And so that's the reason. And so it was enough for me to be all right with it. I still was so uneasy with the whole idea of it, but I accepted that. And then from that program, they promoted me up to Roswell, which is where the same branch with GE Capital, and then worked in their marketing arena.
What year was that? It was 96, wasn't it?
Yeah, I moved here in 96.
So was that before or after the Olympics?
It was during.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, it was February, so the city was already getting prepared for the whole, like, everything. I did not know that was not at all the cause, but it was to move to a city that I didn't know anyone, no one. I knew one person. It was because it was a branch manager from GE Capital that had moved up here, and he was the only one. In fact, he was the one who was trying to introduce me to people so that I could find a place to live, and they were very GE Capital was good in paying for the move and paying for me to find a place, and so, but it was not enough for me to live by myself, and so so I had to find roommates, and they were the 2 roommates were totally gay, and I moved here bi, and but I was lucky even then. One of the guys was dating this super duper rich guy on the radio. He did voiceovers for the radio for 95X back in the day, and through him, because of being the roommate, I got to live vicariously with, like, some great parties, some really great experiences in limos, and some really high-end stuff that I was able to kind of experience because of that relationship. And then the other one was he took the IDs at one of the at Armory. He took the IDs there, and so I was very because I had only been to one gay club, and I was so introverted and so shy. I mean, just almost to an extreme. I mean, I would found out how much it cost for a Coke, for a Coca-Cola, and I had set in my pockets, in 3 of my pockets, exactly how much the Cokes were plus tip, so I wouldn't have to go dig in from my pockets, and I wouldn't have to look up, because when you would look up, that I would notice that guys could be at the other end of the bar kind of stuff, and they could see my face, and it bothered me. So I didn't want to make any eye contact, and so I would do that so I could pull this out, I could pay for it with a tip, and then I could walk away and not have to look. I was really that scared, that introverted. And the only time that a guy was able to even remotely somewhat pick me up is when I was dancing. I was looking down at the ground the whole time. I was not going to dare look up and make eye contact. And he had to literally crane his head underneath to be able to look at me. And I forget what shirt I was wearing. And he made some comment like, "Oh, nice shirt." And then I told him thanks. And that's exactly the only reason why I even had my experience of going to a bar, getting picked up. Because other than that, it was purposely. I remember the ritual of putting this money in my pocket, this money in my pocket. I had it all set out so that I wouldn't have to. The whole idea of looking up and seeing these guys just staring at me was.
And how old were you at this point?
24.
Oh, you were just like.
Yeah, it was.
Cute young thing.
Yeah.
Well, now, which bars did you go to?
Armory was the first one. Backstreets after when I met some people, but Backstreets was I noticed that they stayed really, really late, and I was having a corporate job, so I would always have to leave around midnight, and it's just like, and I say that because even with a Sunday kind of a feeling better day, it still would wear me out so much, and I just noticed that these people were staying up way later. So, and I was at the time would drink just enough that I could, if I needed to order a cab, that I could. And because the guy was Armory, the bouncer was my roommate, I felt very safe in that whole arena. So it was very easy.
So the Armory was kind of your place of choice?
Oh, completely, yeah. Because I would be able to go to leave if someone really bothered me, or if someone was kind of doing a little too much on me, grabbling over me, then I would be able to kind of like scoot his way, and then he would make sure I was all right. And plus, where we lived was very close to Armory.
So where did you live?
Morningside Chase,
okay.
As on Monroe, so it wasn't too far away. And so yeah, that was these were all like realms of my safety. Was that the internet, chat rooms and stuff was really just starting, really blowing up at the time, and so I even had AOL, and everyone at the time was an AOL account. It was always something. And I remember the coffee shop, and now it's Knobs and something else, but it used to be Character Coffee. That was my meeting place for when I would meet guys, but I would have a friend who would go with me and sit at another table.
This sounds so like what women do with their girlfriends, like when they're like.
Oh, I got you. Yeah. Because I was so scared, and so they would like, Roddy, you're not going to be so. You got to just go. And so then we would have little code words or code signals that that they could tell you that it was not going right, or that I would be ready for. But I say that I think three times is when I actually did that meet and greet. Two were absolutely not. Where my friends Andrew and them would be like, oh no, and they wouldn't even allow it to happen, because they were like, this guy is absolutely not, either by the way he looked or whatever. They just were going to be that kind of friend, and they would come up and say, we need you to come home, there's an emergency, and then they would grab me and we'd go.
I like that. We need to come home.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, they were much better, and they had lived here for many years. They were transients as well, but they had been here, and they knew the scene back and forth, and they knew that I was the type that probably could be taken in a heartbeat, meaning like convinced of something or whatever, taken advantage of. And so they were trying to roughen me up in the corners. So I'm saying, like, don't believe this. Like, when I would talk to the people online, it never occurred to me the whole lie bit. That would just really do, because I always thought, well, you're going to meet. There's no really reason to lie. So that's really the reality that I would always think, and then find out that that's absolutely. They would say, oh no, they said these people will lie to your face will lie in order to get you, and all the trouble that it is sometimes to meet people online, and they would say, and people like you would just do it because you would feel bad for them, or that you would just go on with it. And I'm like, well, yeah, exactly. I would. I know I would. I would. So I had some. Andrew was the friend that I met, but he was very protective in that way.
Was Andrew one of those roommates?
No. He was someone I met at Backstreets, and just because he was so, I could easily live vicariously through his personality and through all his interactions. But he was really, really crazy. Crazy dresser. He was very club kid. He was very much a club kid. And in my college years, I really got into kind of a little bit of the rave scene. I really loved the kind of like the music and the repetitiveness.
Yep. Now, was Andrew just a friend, or was he?
No, he was just a friend. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he built props for Backstreet. He was their prop builder. So he's his imagination and just seeing it. And he loved the fact that I had such an appreciation for his art. That he of course enjoyed spending time with me, because literally sometimes we found enjoyment just going through design magazines and kind of saying our points of view, what we liked and didn't like. He did every kind of medium possible. I mean, he loved origami, so he got me into like elementary origami, so I took on a little bit of that. But he worked with metal. He worked in costume design. Anything with foam core, he could shape and cut. He used all those kind of tools, and then lots of paper crafts. He flourished in that kind of art. And so I was in complete adoration and love for that kind of stuff, and I would promote him as much as I could. Try and do shows, try and work with some local people, because at the time I was also looking when friends of ours would have like a loft, a really big loft, and I would try and help them set up where he would just have a little showing of his art, or if I found like local galleries that would do self-taught or springboard artists, to try and get him 1 or 2 pieces in there, and then to try and get him in a circle of how you create work and then sell it, and how that whole kind of circle goes, because he never thought of the stuff in that manner, and then he would struggle. I mean, he was very much like a club kid who was barely making it rent-wise, and so all I was doing was trying to make his life comfortable by figuring out ways that he could make stuff, try to make money from the stuff that he was doing. He was candid and honest about him being HIV positive, and so he was the first. Yeah, so he was the first person I ever met. I was really depressed about a month after he told me. I remember really going through the whole cycle of me looking it up and the first time really seeing the breadth of it, and knowing just a tiny bit of history when I was reading it, but not knowing how vivid the 80s and how that really affected the whole HIV story. And he told me that he was taking care of himself, and he was taking meds. He would have them, and him and I figured out, like, because having so many friends and people wanting things, him and I figured out, like, we had the best time we set aside 2 or 3 hours on Sundays where it was just him and I, and we would play Scrabble, dice, cards, where literally there could be the whole time of an hour could pass and not one word between us, and we just absolutely loved that, not having that pressure of feeling like you had to fill the air with sound. And so we enjoyed that quite a bit. It was, and he would tell me many times over how much he really looked forward to just that kind of like not having any expectation of it, and to know that if we sat and said nothing, that I was not going to judge him in any way or have any kind of ill feel for him.
True friendship.
Yeah, it really was.
Is.
And but he, in order to take the meds, he had to do I think he was with the program with Aid Atlanta or something, that he had to go through counseling, and he didn't have a very good experience with a couple of the counselors. They just made him feel really bad for some reason. Well, and at the time too, he was still taking drugs, and they really were trying to get him out of it to do it, and I was trying to get him out of it because I would just read about how that ill affects all the stuff that he was doing. But at the same time, it was not. I was going to be there for a friend, and I was going to be there for a sounding board, and that silence that we would have, and I could tell where I could do influence or not, and I could tell that may not be my area for him. Me being green, moving here, I kind of knew stuff, so I understood that that was not going to be my place to say, like, you have to stop doing drugs and then keep on your meds. And so he would flounder taking the meds, and he'd be sick quite a bit, and then. And so that went on and on. On and off the whole time I pretty much knew him. And then he finally was. I remember we were going up. He was very independent. Mm-hmm. Very independent. He had a little apartment in it, but it had kind of a steep staircase. And I took him to get his clothes. He was at one of the coin laundry places, and I took him over there, did his laundry. When he brought him back, they were in those like drawstring things, and it's not too heavy, but kind of heavy. And when he turned around and asked me to carry it up, in my head and heart, it all, like, I was completely petrified, because there was absolutely no reason why he would ask me to do it unless he was weak and he wasn't telling me. And so then that's when he said he had stopped taking his meds. He said he had stopped taking them, and that he was going to be all right. And I really didn't understand why he thought he was going to be all right, because I was like, no, they're going to have to put you on different schedules, different regimens in order to make this work, because your body's going to become.
Yeah.
And he knew all that. He really was educated on it. He really was. And then it was about a week and a little over a week prior to him dying. I remember him. We were playing cards or something, and he just out of the blue, he just looked up and said that he was tired. And it wasn't a per conversation or per anything. It was there was some anxiety because he knew I was completely worried about him and concerned, because I had just taken him to the hospital like 2 days prior. He was only in there for 1 day and was able to come back out. This is though for a month prior to that, he was in there for 3 days. It was kind of regular. And so when I took him this time, it was 2 nights before he died. I was in there, we were watching television, and I could hear and he fell asleep, and I could hear his breathing, and it was very distressing. It was very, you could hear all the ins and outs and the whole thing. And so I was really concerned. The next night, he's like, they're putting me on steroids, and I need you to bring me some food or something. And I remember I went to McDonald's and I got like 2 Big Mac meals. So we're talking 2 Big Macs and 2 large fries. And I remember I walked in and set him on the bed and was getting my drink ready and everything. He thought he'd finished off both of them. And he had thought he thought I bought them as both for him, because that's why I just said one thing. And so I went, but when I saw him already going for the second bag, I wasn't going to stop him. And so I'm just continuing watching television. But I remember thinking, he said these steroids make me really, really hungry. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought, oh, well, he's getting his appetite back, everything was going to be fine. And I literally, it was me, I remember taking the bags off, throwing them away, grabbing my drink and saying, okay, well, I'll see you tomorrow. Well, then the next day, I was at work. I got a call from the nurse, but I didn't answer it, because I didn't recognize the number. And thought nothing of it. And then about 2 hours later, the nurse calls again, and the message this time was, this message is for Sherman. I need him to call the hospital. And I remember I was in the car, and I said, oh, well, I'll just swing by there. I mean, there's no reason they'll be able to tell me. And then and Will listened to the message, and when he was at home, I was in the car. Will tried to call me to tell me that that I should go by and pick him up. But he didn't tell me why. The message, all it said was, we just need you to call the hospital. Will got nervous and called the hospital before I got there or whatever. And Will found out, but it was at the same time that I was walking in. And I just remember, walking in thinking I missed his room because this room was empty, or at least I thought it was on the 1 floor. But all these all the tubes and stuff, they were all still just there. Mm-hmm. And then, that's when this really nice this black nurse, she saw in my eyes because I was like looking around confused because I was just past the door, and then she stepped out, and that's when she put her hand on my shoulder, and I lost him. But
how old was he when he died?
He was 38.
Okay.
Yeah, 37.
Did he have family here?
No, he was adopted. He had 14 brothers and sisters in Orlando. He was from Ohio, but he transferred down to Orlando, where he worked in the Magic Kingdom for a while. Before he died, we had conversations about stuff we would do if we were to die and things that we'd want and don't want. And he adamantly said that he didn't want his family to know until after he was cremated. Yeah, he said, if I died, because I'm definitely going to be cremated, but no one should tell my family until after that, because they were religious, and he was so afraid that they would not allow them to be cremated. What's funny is, as much as we talked about it, we didn't do a living will kind of thing. Illegally, we did one after the fact, because all the friends and stuff wanted me to be the one to make the decisions, because so we did one. So I could at least have that coverage. Really, all it really was is we were able to. We had 5 or 6 of his friends. We all went over to his apartment and kind of went through it. Personally, went through all his stuff, and yes, we all had different attachments to different things, and so we all kind of were able to share all his belongings and stuff. It was mostly art anyway, so we loved that. And then his mom, we told his mom after he was cremated, and she wanted, when we told her about him being cremated, she wanted some of his ashes. And so I couldn't do it, but Will did. Will flew down to Orlando and and gave her half the ashes. Said she was nice, but she was in a wheelchair. She had lost both her legs to diabetes or something, and so but she was gentle. He said she was gentle and nice, but not a lot of conversation happened between them because Will didn't know them very well. It was just really just a conversation that we had, letting him know, unfortunately, that he died. And then the other portion of it, he also wanted them strung off of a roller coaster. And so we had the other 7 of our friends go to Six Flags, and they each had a Ziploc with some of his ashes, and so they were able to let it go off of one of the curves. So yeah, that was cool. And then Gert, she has about 6 or 7 disco balls, and in her quilt area above her table, she has these disco balls hanging up, and then one of them has all the other the ashes are inside the crystal, the disco ball. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And at some point very soon we're going to get to Gert and to the quilt, but and I know you made a panel for him, and I do want to talk about that. But you mentioned Will. Yeah. Can you talk about Will? Yeah,
in fact, I met him at the club of all places. In fact, met him
at the Armory.
No, at the it's a club used to be called Red. There, and it was literally the day after Robin and I broke up. We were so my friends were like, best way of getting over someone, let's just go out to the club. This is not what I wanted to do. I was going to be miserable, and that's how I was going to deal with it. But they said, no, come on. So I went out to the club and I met him, and I told him, I was like, I'm not worth the wait right now. It's like there's no telling when I want to even think about a relationship. So and so he was very, very patient. Like it was. I said, I'm not going to be down with just dating one person right now. I need to figure myself out or play the field some more and that kind of stuff. So it was 6 weeks of him being very nice and doing the asking me if I was available on a Friday night or Saturday night to go out on a date. Very kind of old school kind of stuff. It was very bizarre. But I just told him, I said, look, if you push just a tiny bit too hard, I'm going to walk away. So he really was gentle about playing this whole thing. Oddly enough, at the same time, I was actually trying to see this other guy, but he was a mutual friend of all of ours. So they knew, and I was very honest with both of them. I said, look, this is not about boyfriend stuff. This is about just kind of figuring it out. But after the 6 weeks, I realized that definitely I started had feelings for Will, and so now this was in 1999. So it was so 20 years later. I mean, he's his dad's Puerto Rican and his mom is German.
Wow.
Yeah, and so he comes from a big family of 9. He was his dad died in the Vietnam War, and so but he was in the military as well, in the Army, 4 years active and then 2 years reserve. He was a linguist in the intelligence department. Wow. So you can hear an accent, but he speaks the English language very, very well because of that position that he was in. He just doesn't know maybe some of our sarcasms and some of our. But when you're in a relationship with someone that's foreign or that has that background, you learn that being sarcastic in arguments is absolutely the worst thing you could possibly do. So for him not to understand fully some of the words and choices that we do, it would only add to our arguments. So I realized I can either be an ass and continue that kind of banter, or I can be an adult and realize that this is not the way. This is not the way to find closure or conclusions that would be nice for both of us. But I know he's great.
How are your ages?
He's 6 years older.
Okay.
So yeah. So currently, like right now, I'm 46. He's 52.
And what does he do now?
He was property management. So he worked for this apartment complex. He did their property management for 4 or 5 years. Then a friend of ours bought an apartment complex, and so Bill came in and helped him with all the legalese and getting it all set up. He's really good with the detail stuff. And then now he volunteers and works sometimes with the quilts.
That's great.
Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah. And so now he's right now he's in between. Or I say in between. Right now we're at a point where he can kind of find what he really wants to kind of dive into next. I'm trying to push him into translation, because to me it's like if I knew another language as comfortably as he does, that's his home language. There's money to be made with translations and all that stuff, and he loves the language, and so I'm trying to push him in that arena. He's looking at possibly getting his degree again, or his, what's it called, for people who want kind of in the real estate.
Oh arena. Yeah. Mm-hmm,
he's wanting to go back and get his
okay.
Maybe get that to go to that, but we'll see. Yeah, figure it out.
So what did your family think of him?
They absolutely love him. He's very patient and kind of soft-spoken, but they, because they're this country, they're fascinated by the whole German thing. They can hear the language, the accent. Every time he comes, of course, they have something for him to fix or something. He's he's definitely more tech savvy than I am, and so he jumps right on it and really helps him out in that kind of arena. Him and my mom, and it's more of a tongue-in-cheek thing they've made. Mom hates the idea that I want to get cremated, and so she made a deal with him that if, for whatever reason, if I was to die before she does, that she would give him half my life insurance policy if I promised not to cremate me. And I was like, Mom, even though that's my desire, my will is to be cremated. She goes, I can't. It's just like, so that's her inside joke with Will, is that they're going to split my life insurance policy if I die before she does. But so yeah, they have a great relationship.
That's great.
And really, my niece calls all the time, and sometimes only talks to him because they're, so that's all.
Is this the niece that found your video when you were a kid?
Yeah. Now she just got her first car. She just turned 16, so yeah, she's great.
And do you have you met, like, obviously in 20 years, you know his parents?
Yeah, well, the dad died in the Vietnam War, but his mom, she died actually just only about 10 years ago.
Okay.
But she died and she stayed in Germany. There's quite a complicated story with. She was a single mom, because in fact he's got, out of the 9, I think it's from 2 men or 3 men total, and because of the Catholic Church, they've had a very big hand into separating the family. What they did was they went into and said that they had a home, or they had a living situation or a work situation where they were going to bring the whole entire family, and so but they couldn't bring them all on the same plane, and so they took 7 of the brothers and sisters first, but then they lied to his mother, and said that they had died in a plane crash.
Are you kidding?
Yeah. I get kind of emotional about it when I think about because they so she thought these brothers and sisters died, and so he never knew his never knew to even look for them at first, because they were dead. That's all he knew. And then and so when they split the kids up, and some went to pig farms in Ohio, and some went to work for, there was all like these kind of work situations. And then the older daughter, when they found out, because the oldest daughter, the one who actually lives now here in Columbus, Georgia, her and the mother were kind of sometimes fighting because the mother's like, stop, it was like, you don't have a good situation, you're not being a responsible mother, all that kind of stuff. And so she told the daughter told her, if you have another kid, I'm not going to talk to you ever again. So she was pregnant with Will at the time that the sister and the daughter told her that. So she kept Will a secret from her daughter. Yes. And they laugh about it now because the daughter would send, because it's still the oldest daughter, and then there was 2 other siblings that now are living with the mother. And she would send Christmas presents to those 2 and the mother, and because Will was a secret, she would get anything. So, Will. And she felt, believe me, to this day, this woman feels horrible about it. She's the kindest woman almost that I think I know outside of my mother. She was really that beautiful of a person. She thinks about that stuff. It's like, I cannot believe, she would always say, like, when they're talking, I can't believe Mom did that. I mean, like, all the times that she would send these presents, and they would be, nicely wrapped and given to, with the brothers and sisters' names and the mother, and Will would never get them. So she did finally find out about Will, and then she was moving to the States, and but she was keeping tabs on Will, and they grew up healthy. Will got into the military, which is why he in the U.S. military, and so that's when he moved to the States and Columbus, Georgia. He lived there, and actually he lived in Jacksonville for just a year. But yeah, now he lived in Columbus, and she's still there. She's been with her husband 58 years, Felipe. He's Puerto Rican. She's German, so it's very similar to the dynamics of the mother and father. Like I said, they're 73 and 80, something like that, 73 and 89 or something, or 82. And they're both beautiful. They're both awesome people. And now he's relationships with his brothers and sisters. So he still's in contact with one of the older brothers. One of his older brothers comes down. He's from Ohio, and sometimes when we go visit at the same time, and so I get to see his brother's family. And because he was so young when he moved to the States, he has no German accent. And so I was all thrilled and happy, like, I get to hear another German accent. He sounds just like me. He sounds like us.
So they eventually discovered that the others were alive.
So they
how did they figure that out?
Yeah, you know what? The discovery part is the part I'm not absolutely sure of. But yeah, they're totally as if it all, they have great animosity towards the Catholic Church and Red Cross, because they both were working together to make all that happen. And so they just said it was really bad, all that.
Wow.
But so they were able to, and like three other sisters, they were able to build relationships with. And outside of that, the story with the whole Catholic Church, they're just like any other family that lives in the States. They each have their children and grandchildren, and so they look back on hearing them talk about the mother, who again had all these kind of like relationships and children, and she was when they kind of explained some of the demographics of East Germany and West Germany, and because she was Polish descent, there was almost like an area that you could plot out that says these were Polish, but they were in the middle of the. So it wasn't like she was free in her, even as a Polish woman with unwed Polish mother who was. So there was lots of like things against her and this whole family raising them that she had to deal with, and so at the end they were she's forgiven her, of course. She like I said, she died 6 or 10 years ago, but and Will was fine with he had wished he had made contact with her prior to her dying, but outside of that he's comfortable with her now, understanding some of the stories they get to share, stories of growing up together, and so that's kind of nice.
I'm glad they were able to find one another.
Yeah.
Now, do you plan to get married?
We do. We're going to do next year. We actually have not a real valid reason. I'm just comfortable, and well, of course, it not being illegal until a few years back. and we've had a number of our friends, even that definitely been in relationships shorter than we have. We're kind of the cornerstone from a number of our groups. We've been together for 20 years. That they've already gotten married. So we're like, what's the reason why we haven't done this? And it's just out of comfortable things. But
when you think back to the very first relationship you had, where you were like, don't be seen with me outside, and like how far things have come.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that make you feel?
I mean, I too, I know, and it is, and more in awe that when I do think of myself flipping through the book, unbelievable that these people were in those positions, and then for it to come all the way to the point of holding hands in public and legally being married and having the same faults that the straight marriages have, and some struggles and benefits. It's astounding.
Did you think that we would get to this stage as quickly as we did?
No,
because it seemed to happen, but like all of a
say,
sudden it was like, what?
I actually didn't. I didn't think it. I thought for sure it was going to be one of those the battles that are going to be underlying for as long as I lived, and also to be in the realm of HIV and AIDS and and disease itself in that realm. It's one of the not being able to get married. I just thought was going to be forever.
Yeah.
Same thing where I thought that I didn't know the story with HIV and AIDS prior to even '96, but to know that that's when the pinnacle point of the medicines kind of come together. That I wouldn't believe a cure would be accessible.
And here we have like PrEP, and so it's like.
Yep, definitely.
But it would come a long, long way.
Yeah.
How do you feel about just getting political just for a moment? How do you feel about the current administration's sort of a few steps backwards?
It's hard to put into words.
When you've been like all of a sudden it's like, okay, everything's good and right with this world, and then it's not.
For me to have to call my mom, because I know she's a Republican and she voted for him. I knew she was beforehand, and I remember the morning of calling to tell her that she couldn't get her feelings hurt, but that I couldn't talk to her for 3 days. I just knew. I said, "Mom, I'm just letting you know now. I do not want to talk to you for 3 days. We'll talk about it later," kind of stuff. And so she respected me and understood, because all I could do is like be in disbelief. This is where we were going. That I was so wrong. I mean, I really thought. I always, certain bills would be, battling throughout the years and stuff. Yes, there would be great disappointment sometimes when I would be like, wow, we can't convince enough, good people or enough people to get on board to say this is a good thing. But be all right with it, because there would be some debate, and I could see, I could kind of see the other side, and so I would at least be empathetic to that, and know that it would be kind of, the whole yin and yang of things. It would be our turn, or at least would come out to ballot. This is a totally different game. I mean, I'm just to realize now, to see some of the attention being drawn to the tricks and things that could possibly come out of the investigation with Mueller, makes me then understand, at least at the core, that this wasn't fair game. This was not, this was not a matter of the majority. That I realized that she won the popular and the whole. Even outside of that, this is not a fair game. It was just not a way to. This was not a way to win an election. So his election is illegitimate, which is why from the very beginning I would be on that whole thing of not my president, which I just can't. No, it's made me a lot. It's made me watch some ridiculous series on Netflix and stuff, because I have to unplug in that way, and I just will watch some stuff that before I would totally be like, I would not waste my time, but it takes my brain out of that whole thing, and I have to just enjoy that because if I've really plugged in sometimes to the news and to 24/7 thing, and it doesn't. I have to look at myself and the way that I feel internally and externally when I go through a few days of it, and I realize it's really just not healthy. It's not. I'm not making a point or change by engulfing myself into that kind of misery. But to understand it, to really, because I think of the whole idea of, you put it out there, positive thoughts, and you really want it kind of out there. So I have to think, in this kind of positive realm versus the negative, and I know that the senses have got to, people have, there's got to be some flashbang that's going to, that people are going to realize that maybe this isn't the decision, maybe this isn't the direction that we need to be going in, because are we better, are we happier, are we...
Some people are richer.
That's about it. I know. And when my mom was, I pay almost all her stuff. I mean, honestly, from her depends, from her, all the way. I mean, so she's dependent on me, and I sit there and think, when they talk about these little, with healthcare, that totally dings me on so many different ways. And she's in Florida, and I'm here, and I usually let that stuff, and I still do. I let the stuff her. I don't want her to experience any kind of like nervousness or anything about that. But I just sit there and think to myself, like, woman, if you only knew, like, who you're following right now, it's just absolutely, She does at least listen to me when I called her last week, and I said, I will absolutely not talk to you if you vote for DeSantis. If you vote for him, I'm not going to talk to you. And she says, okay, I will vote for Durham, the second one. Mm-hmm. And she voted for him instead. And I told her that she can't, now that he's made it, she can't vote for him when it comes. She can sit out. She can go vote for whatever she needs to, and for anyone else, but she has to not vote for him because he's vile. He's absolutely vile. I can't even deal with that one. And because I knew that's something that would definitely affect her. And she gave some reasons why she didn't particularly like him. And so I was at least agreeing with that. And so she's promised me, at least on this point, that she won't vote for him for that reason. I'm like, okay, if I could just take one. Because my other sister is also Republican. My younger sister is Democrat. Okay. So it's easier to talk to my younger one politics-wise, but outside of that, politics is not a conversation starter with us. So.
Yeah, it's best not.
Yeah.
Well, things might change.
Yep.
I want to start talking about the Names Project, the AIDS Quilt. So, at some point, you decided corporate America wasn't for you.
Not at all. I had realized that under a 4-year period, they make you, when you start, you have to write these short-term goals and long-term goals. One of my short-term goals was they have these bands of levels of management. So I wanted to be at a band 5, and so that's all I wanted. And it was a band level that my boss was at. And I remembered in 4 years, I'm like, wow, I really climbed pretty quickly because the group that came with me were still actually on the frontline phones, and I was already. So, but I was experiencing some of the mid-management meetings where, because it's credit cards, they were waiting on something to change where they could charge more for NSF checks. I remember this being a conversation with GE. And they're like, okay, California's about to pass the fact that we can hit them up with $35 or something like that for NSF, going up from like $25. And I remember being in the meeting, and it was just occurring to me, I'm thinking, why are they trying to get more money out of these people that obviously bounced a check? I mean, it just adds, it really wasn't. And I realized I was somewhat naive on that greed of it, and I was more on the process of it, the whole there was many times throughout the years working there of me explaining APR and to our interest to an older person on the phone of why the bill's going to be this and why it's going to take them this long to pay it off if they do it. I understood the process of it. I didn't enjoy the greed and knowing how much these people were being charged, but I realized, hey, it's part of that. It's just a part of the corporate thing, and according to the retail financing services end of it. And I remember being in the meeting and the question of, why are we after more money for the thing? And I remember I started to raise my hand, and then I realized, looking at people's faces and knowing their position in GE and their personalities, I had a feeling of what the answer was going to come back to me was. And I remember I pulled my hand down, and that was part of the start of me deciding it's not where I want to be. And so, again, I was 4 years into it, realizing that my boss was at the band I wanted to be at. And so I then started kind of watching his day-to-day interaction and what he did, and didn't really make a difference. And I didn't feel figuring out different ways of thinking our customers, or listening to. I had part of my 5 or 10% of my job was quality control, where I would have to log into random collectors and random customer service people and listen to their phone calls with customers, and then give coaching afterwards. And hearing that whole realm of the whole, it gave full circle towards the whole thing, and I didn't enjoy that part. So that was where I said, okay, I'm walking away. So I quit without having, and believe me, it was the first time ever that I actually quit. I didn't have a thing going. I didn't have another job in place, ready, nothing. But I had the Liz situation where I could at least go for, I knew, probably 6 months at most, that I could be all right with the financial situation. I'm taking care of myself still. That I decided, okay, I want to find a local, any nonprofit. I wasn't looking any field. It was just I was looking for something locally that I could volunteer at. That's all I wanted. I didn't want money to be involved. I wanted it where I could go and give either any skill set that I had, or actually no skill set at all. And if you're going to tell me to hammer 12 nails, I'm going to hammer 12 nails. That's all. That's all I wanted. Something to give of my time and my body and energy. And so I did Habitat for Humanity a little bit, down 2 homes, and then was at a house party. A friend of mine was the DJ, and he said, "Oh, a friend of mine's coming in from San Francisco." Well, she moved here. I guess it was in 2001 from San Francisco. You're going to meet her for the first time. We go way back, and so it happened to be Gert. I had not ran into her yet, and so and this was also way back when I actually was I smoked back then. So I was smoking a cigarette and taking a break. So I'm outside. I'm sitting on a bench, and this woman comes plopping, kind of rushly, like from dancing or whatever. She kind of boisterously sits next to me and asks me if I had a light. And then gave a light, and we started talking, and realized that, I'm supposed to meet you tonight. And so we were just talking about Darren, really, our mutual friend.
First of all, explain who Gert is, because for people
so
watching this.
Gert with the quilt, with the Atemporal quilt, that began in San Francisco, and we were founded in 1987. In 1985, when Cleve started with the idea, kind of bouncing around, he had some even meetings where he published them or put them out at this local coffee shop, and he was like looking for people to kind of come together and really start going with the idea or flowing and figuring out where they wanted to go. She was the first volunteer. I
didn't realize that.
She was the first volunteer that showed up, and she even later on, she was the first one to show up with panels. And so she had, and they thought that the quilt, of course, they thought they were going to be able to create it, show it, and then they were going to find a cure with the money that raised, and then they were going to take the quilt back. So she had her name on the back of every single one of the panels, because she thought they were going to send them back to her. So her name, it's funny, in the very beginning, you'll see her name and address on all the backs of all of them, of the ones that she did. She was the first volunteer. So we were founded in 87. They moved here in 2001 from San Francisco to Atlanta. She moved with the quilt. She was the only one, but she moved with the quilt, and she was here. She's been here since then, and she, from her first volunteer position with the quilt, she was hired on, and then she's kind of progressed into her positions. But she is a seamstress by heart, so she can sew. So when all these new panels come in, she's the one responsible for actually sewing them all together into the block. So she has sewn, we say figuratively, she's sewn like 70% of the entire quilt, but in a way that binds it together, kind of thing. So she was the one that, I met her. She explained what she did. She was very passionate about it. And again, I didn't know anything, definitely didn't know about anything about the quilt. Yeah, I think I've seen maybe some speeches from Elizabeth Taylor or that kind of thing, some of those iconic images. But that's all that I knew, really. And then so she said, and because of where it was at, I lived close by. I could walk there. And she said, well, sometimes at night I do repairs, and that's all I do is repairs. I didn't know how to sew. She said, well, that's the kind of like. She's like, I love to teach people exactly what I want from them. That's what she said. And so, okay, she showed me exactly what I needed to do. And I didn't realize either that that's a prized position to do sew repairs with her, because she's very protective of it. And so I would even have employees before I was hired, when I was just volunteering again to do these repairs. Like sometimes I'd go and we'd spend 2 or 3 hours just kind of doing repairs. I would be approached by some staff and asking me how I got into the position to be able to do repairs, because they said they'd been there they worked there and she wouldn't allow them to do their repairs with her.
Everyone likes you the best.
So I just thought it was weird, and so that was the main thing, because she could show me exactly what she wanted, and I learned, from the very beginning that of her personality is very low patience. She always has nil, and she like the joke that we have that she tells me is that, because I'm a friend, that if ever she loses the ability to walk, with her legs, she said she wants me to kill her. Because she said the absolute worst thing for her would be to have to listen to a boring story and that she can't get away from it. She can't get away. So that's what she made me promise. She goes, promise me you'll put me out.
That's great.
Yep. So yeah, that's who Kurt was.
So
I volunteered for less than 6 months, and then they happened to have a position available in the warehouse, which was the heavy lifting, was the pulling the quilt off the shelves, taking the cardboard, forming them into the boxes, packing them up, shipping, all that kind of like warehousing kind of stuff. So I did that for about almost 6 months, and then I became, at the same time, I was always very inquisitive or very open to the learning process. Again, for me, it's all about kind of learning that whole thing. And then I began to see some inefficiencies or areas where I could say, like, maybe let's try this a certain way. Because when the quilt was here, and they call themselves this, but the group before they handled them, they sometimes would call themselves dinosaurs, because they were kind of like the old group, and they were very protective of the quilt. And so when they moved it here, it also came with it processes, some old processes that they were not making. And so a lot of the employees at the time were also very afraid of rocking the boat, of really making changes, because it was so preached to them about, this is the way it's done, this is why we do it. Whereas I came in a little bit naive and kind of was thinking, why are you doing it this way? Or, well, let's try this instead. And so I was able to kind of work in some really time savers, and some and some of the employees weren't maybe not as efficient in some certain things that were easy teaches, easy show them how to do this and that kind of thing. So then it kind of was moving me back and forth between the physical of the quilt and doing some like leg work, or helping with some of the campaigns that they were doing. And then I realized too that there's something innately in me that I have to physically exert something. So because she was offering me something where I was going to be behind the desk the whole time.
Who was it? Who was
Julie? Julie was trying to find a position where I could be more closely to more of the campaign, more of the donor management systems. And I totally was enthralled in her. That's definitely something I would love to do. But we just had to figure out ways that I could be put to always be there to assist the warehouse. Because for some reason physically I had to desert. I had to be that close to the to physically handling the quilt, and because in the other position I could go weeks. Just kind of again helping with story, helping with the campaigns, and didn't feel as compelled. I didn't know anyone with it outside of Andrew, but I didn't have anyone on the quilt specifically that I knew. So it really was just a matter of these stories that Gert, and believe me, of all the hours that we did repairing, looking back now, I feel very, very privileged that I got to hear these incredibly emotional stories from her about all these panels and her friends, and the smallest quips I could ask, why is why is this one edge purple? And she would know because she would be able to tell me the story of how this came to be. So yeah, even the most minute, sometimes detail of these panels, she definitely.
You almost need to have her like panel by panel, like go on film and talk through.
Right.
What you're seeing.
Yeah, because there's lots of times
meaning.
when I would have a story and there would be people that, of course, familiar with the quilt and familiar with some other panels, they wouldn't know that quip. They wouldn't understand that little bit of it. And she would explain. She would know the story behind it. One, because she, back in the day, when the quilt, we're talking thousands of panels made a week were being sent into the quilt. And so she had experienced a tremendous flush of panel makers. She's having to physically, emotionally even hear the stories of these panels being sent in by a number of the panel makers. Now, outside of that, yes, they were getting just boxes and boxes of all these new panels, and so she really wouldn't know specifically the story. But yeah, so all that, she got flushed with all that many, within the first couple of years. And definitely the first year leading up to the first display of the 1920 that were displayed in DC. And so now the way the roles play out is I do all the new panel check-in, and so I read the story, and then she does the logistically putting them together. So she doesn't know the story, and so sometimes we get a laugh or a little, we get a sharing of her. What she'll do is she'll kind of do it. She loves disco, so the process is that it's usually after 5, but she'll blast disco music into place. And she will then lay the new panels out like an artist would, horizontal blues, vertical greens, and then she just starts handling them and while she's dancing along. And she always calls them her boys, even though there's definitely women represented on the quilt. But she'll sometimes, not really sure. She does it artistically. It's all, she's not looking for, in the early days, because we'd get so many from like a New York area or some area of the United States, it was easier to do demographically. We want these together. Because when we would send them on display, it's easier to send those in those specific regions. When they started to taper off and we weren't getting 1,000 new panels a week, it began artistically. So now it's all artistic. And so she might question certain ways that she's doing it. She'll take a snapshot or with her phone, and I'll get a message all of a sudden that says, "Do you like this one or this one?" She'll give it kind of a way. And then when I look at them, I'll say, well, the story behind this one, or kind of give another reason why maybe to do it a certain way. Those are always kind of just nice add-ins to the process.
So you don't, the way I'm hearing it is like people send the quilt in often with a letter or something about the person who had AIDS. And does any family members ever come in?
Oh, lots.
And how is that for you?
Yeah, well, for instance, when I had to learn that when I do new panel check-in, that I finally had to figure out that I had to choose a day, because what was happening was I was getting wrecked emotionally reading these letters, and it could only be at like 11 o'clock, and I still have a day of work, and it really messed me up emotionally, and so much so that I was trying to figure out, and it would be snapshots of these stories that I would read because there are new panels coming in, and so I couldn't figure out why it would just drain me. And then I finally figured out, okay, so let me just let's say Tuesdays. So then I figured out I'm only going to do Tuesdays for new panel check-in. So then I knew that it was going to be, and Will would know when I would come home that I was going to be just beat. And so I would read these stories, and then and before being a panel maker myself, I felt the need and desire that these panel makers would want to hear a voice that says that their panel is received. Because the way the process worked, there could be a time lapse where we don't necessarily are, organizing these maybe 6 months later, and so to call them would be the other part of it, right? So then you're hearing, the mother who either she admits to making it 6 months ago and that she just couldn't let it go until now, or that she had to get her friends who's a seamstress because she doesn't know how to sew, and that where the seamstress would work to get it to the likings of the person, to hear the grandchildren who might want to get involved, and how they had just a tiny little hand in it. And these are sometimes when I would call it the Midwest people that whatever that conversation about that their loved one who died of AIDS is not a topic that's going to come up, and so they are able to expel so much of that energy over the phone to listen to them through therapy times. And I'm not a phone person, and so it's just funny to hang the phone up sometimes, and I would look and I'm like, wow, that was an hour. And I would think like, I was on the phone for an hour. I really would. I'm not that much of a talker on the phone and stuff, but to realize that that was a part of it that I learned quickly. That this gives to the process. It gives a lot of good energy.
Catharsis, I would imagine.
It does, and it also adds to the me. When they are sewing to a block, and then when I'm looking at it, or if someone else is looking at it, if I'm there, I'm able to kind of carry on that story of why the mother saved the frozen steaks in her freezer 5 years after her son died, because they were supposed to have the steak dinner the night before. And that her parents and that their kids thought she was crazy, and we were like, Mom, after the third refrigerator, they were transferred these 2 steaks. They knew they had to move these 2 steaks into the freezer, and then she finally agreed that she was getting crazy, so she had to throw them away. But stories like that, those are the kind of stuff that are part of each one of these panels. And I feel again I'm very privileged and honored to be able to even talk to them and let them know that how the whole process is. Because again, some of these are just letting things go because the other brothers and sisters like, Mom, in order for this to be part of the cool, you got to let it go. You got to send it in, and so it builds trust in the whole process. So they're and then to know that these are not tech savvy people. So for it to be photographed and put online gives the appetite for all the other ones that are able to get online and do it. But a lot of these are some of the older panel makers. They just want to see, they want to see an image. It's not going to be there looking it up, but they'll have that grandchild, or they'll have the other brother and sister be able to show them a picture of it. And they love that kind of stuff. Yeah. And also, they'll give me an email address of the brothers and sisters that they want me to send. So I'll send the brothers and sister, the surviving brother and sister, the image of it, just enough so they can share with the mom or dad. So
it must feel. I know you can get worn down from some of that, but it must feel good to go to work every day and know that you're doing something really meaningful.
It does. When the families, and I mean there's last year, actually 2 years ago, a family. It was a mother and father who had 3 kids, and one of the sons died, and they made a panel, and he's on the quilt. The daughter was getting married close by, but their extended family, there was cousins and uncles and aunts. They had a total of 19 of them, and they all came to the quilt to see the panel. Oh. And we're talking babies. And so the Johnsons, the husband and wife, they came in, and the block had just came back from Hawaii because there was a display in Hawaii, and these little details, when I was able to tell them, they just came back from Honolulu. They had a display, and so one of the little quips that to them, the grandma and grandpa was able to share with all the family was that they were able to that he beat them to Hawaii because they had not gotten to Hawaii yet. And so, but it was a family reunion of sorts, and they were there for the wedding of the brother. The surviving sister. But they all came, and so we're talking, and they were doing, holding baby up in front of the panel to be able to share that, and then they were telling the stories of Darnell, the person who died, telling these kind of quips and stories, and why they chose this red here. Why they have this, this tassel here? Why is this horse picture in the corner? So hearing them kind of tell those stories was also
fabulous.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite panel?
Yeah, one is, it's odd. It's from of all things, it's a college or a university, and it's a picture of a tree. The whole entire panel is a brown. You see the brown base of the trunk of the tree. The leaves are the materials called is tulle.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and tulle has been semi-shaped, but not clearly, but shaped in kind of leaves. And they're each it's got like the greens, very autumn colors. But the whole panel is these tulle leaves, and they're attached to these branches. And so it's funny when you lift it and you look at it. It just the vibe of it is very, very cool. I mean, just you don't know it's tulle, and then you really start to look at it, and you're like, okay, it totally looks like it's just kind of leaves stacked on top of each other. But it's just these massive amounts of these tulle leaves that are completely covering this tree. It's
cool.
very, very simple. That is one of my favorites. Of course, I would have a inkling for Andrews.
So what did you put on Andrews?
So Andrews was a little nickname he had for himself, as well as his company was Blue Boy, Atlanta. So the background is blue, it's just a dark blue, and I know I wanted his name to be prominent, of course. And so what I did is on one of his pieces of artwork, and he did. He loved Dr. Seuss and that kind of like the imagination, where it was very whimsical, and that it really had sometimes no direction, but it was very, very. And so his signature is more of just a manuscript kind of name. I took it, blew it up, and then used one of his shirts that he loved to go disco out or go dancing with. Was this kind of crushed, and it's something we went out to a secondhand store, and buying some clothes, and he loved that realm. Junkman's Daughter locally is one of those stores, and he loved this one particular shirt, and so I cut the material for each of his letters out from that shirt, and so it's prominently there. Me and Will had a loft out on 14th Street with a large concrete finished floor. But it was just plain concrete, and so I commissioned him to paint just the front foyer area, and because it used to be an old packing company, it had these odd drains in the floor, and so he painted it to look like blue and orange paint had been spilt off to the edges, and then just kind of circle the drain and go into that drain. And so part of the design is you see this orange kind of fabric material here, and the fact that the backing is blue. Let's see, I did a Scrabble board because we did our 2 hours of Scrabble on Sundays, using things that like origami and some of the words that I chose, Atlanta, that were kind of prominent. So a few pictures of the quilt went to DC in 2004. We just brought the last 1,000 blocks. It wasn't the entire quilt. He was a volunteer, so he traveled with me to DC, and so there's a picture of. We were completely exhausted that first day. I mean, sun beating down, 1,000 blocks. And we were just so beat. And so there's a picture of us on the top of one of the blue packs just kind of resting. And so there's a picture of him and I. And then his favorite holiday was Halloween. There's one of his favorite Fu Manchu outfits that he had. And then lastly I was trying to figure out what piece of artwork I wanted to kind of show on there. And it took me, the actual panel took me 4 months to sew. I don't know how to sew, but it's not 4 months if you look at it. It is, someone could knock it out probably within a few days. It's just I didn't know how to sew, and so of course and I don't know how to use a sewing machine. It's all by hand. Another thing is these conversations that you're having, or that I had with Andrew at the time, was while I'm making it, knowing that he's an artist and that he's very design conscious. I was really thinking, should I do this or should I do that? With the Scrabble board, it would have been very easy for me to simply have a Scrabble, like the word origami, to keep it all just one, with the different tiles, and just simply cut around the edges and have it as one piece that says origami. For some reason, I had this thing with him being so detail oriented. I cut the tiles out and sewed every single tile. So, just to show you that was the matter of detail, and it's because I know that's the way he works, and mentally or whatever. And so again, that's another reason why it kind of took me forever. But I finally figured out, instead of and it took me 3 months to sew it, 1 month to try and figure out this very last component, something that showcased his art. And I finally figured out, I made a QR code. So at any point, years and years later, you can scan it, and it brings you to a slideshow of all his artwork, from his origami to his metal to his marker to his pencil work, everything. His collaging, it's all in there. And in fact, in order to get the slideshow, part of his memorial service had, he was big on making the rule was birthday presents had to be handmade. Okay, that was his only rule. Can't buy it. He knew I wasn't an artist, and so I would usually give his a couple of months after birthdays, because he forced me to freaking make this, his gift for him. And so he thrived on the idea of making these gifts for me. And so he made these, he loved this idea of this, he would make me these, I forget what they're called, but he would take boxes, almost like a clearance box, but he would do this entire incredible scene inside using marker and clay and all kind of stuff. And then he would randomly cut these little squares out from the sides where you could do a lighter and see from the angle of the light. And that was his way. That was he called them his view boxes, but and he made me one for 3 years straight, I think it was. And then one of the last ones he gave me was this because we looked through those magazines, the Elle Decor magazines and stuff. He made me what's called the Traveling Living Room, and it's a traveling living room where you can pull out these really intricate chase lounges that he made from construction paper and from Legos and from beads and from everything. And it is an entire living room set up. And you flip it over, the rug is reversible. The artwork kind of looks like Van Gogh-ish, kind of, if you look at it. The curtains are made from velvet, so it's got little velvet and drawbacks on it. And you can move it around. You can do whatever you want. The pieces come out separately, so you can do your living room as all that, however you want to do it. So that was the last present that he gave me. And so these are for his memorial. I asked everyone else, I'm like, bring the gifts that he made for you, and we're just going to showcase it like a gallery. And so we had all of these pieces of art that he had done for them. So I took pictures of them and then used those pictures as the slideshow that showed all this stuff. It was great. It was turned out really nice. Because that relationship that I had with him making birthday, he had that with many of the other friends.
It really highlights just how incredibly personal each of the panels is.
Completely.
When you think about all of the thought that goes into the sort of design.
Completely. I mean, there's the one where the panel was seen, the panel was made. The brother that was memorialized has 2 other brothers and 3 sisters. They live all across the United States. And so they are requesting many times over that the block, if there's a display in their area, that comes to them. Well, in the panel in the corner is a pair of, it's like jeans up to about midway, but you can see the front pockets. The front pockets have zippers that have been attached to them. And so they decided as a family that any time that the panel came and they were able to see it, they had to write a note with the date and said, like, still miss you, or I'm thinking of you today. And then they would unzip the shorts. I mean, if they would unzip those pants and then stick them in the pockets. And so like today, for instance, the pockets are kind of bulging, but it's really quite loving to think of them. And so much so that when we were in D.C., one of the brothers is handicapped. He was from the war, and so he has both his arms were blown off, and he only has them up to his elbows. He came late, and so the block had already been taken up and put into the train canister. And he came late, and then when he was telling me what he was looking for his brother, and he said he's mad at himself for being stuck in traffic and all this other stuff. And when he told me the name of it, he was reminding me of the name, so I looked it up, and I was trying to look at it. I'm like, why is this like familiar? And then he said, one of my brothers and sisters may have already requested it, or may have already. And so then I went there and dug it out because and so he had to see him only because he wanted to do it, and he wanted to also do it because he had to tell his mother. He said because he had to call his mom when she had to give witness, And to just literally, it's beaming sun in the middle of the summer in DC. We pulled it out, and then to see him maneuver in a way to be able to write, even with his little apparatus thing, but to be able to write on a piece of torn paper was kind of. So yeah.
Wow. Has Andrew's panel travelled much?
Yeah, quite a bit. In fact, even though everyone's here, so what's funny is it travels, but it travels because of the people that are around him.
Uh-huh.
And this, I forgot the last name of it, but this Michael has this where his panel is. There's a Michael, his last name starts with an S. I can't remember right off. His sister requested the block come to New York, where she's from and where he's from. Well, she was doing she was also part of the ceremony, or was part of this event where she was going to be able to go in front of people with the panel or with the block there and talk about her brother. She's the one who had this great. She called to ask if I knew if I knew a story about the other 7 that were attached to her brother, so she could have that. And so she was. I went in archives, found the stories. Of course, was able to share about Andrew. And sure enough, she went and spoke, and she had this great speech that we have. I think we have it in archives now, because she knew I would want it, so she sent it in order for me to put it in the file. But that, yeah, she was able to talk about so and so's brother, how this woman is named after her mother. You know, little things, the information we grabbed from the archives, she was able to use in her.
That's fantastic.
But the idea that for her to have about that whole, like, I would just love to tell people about the people that are surrounding my brother. I just thought
it just makes it very sort of community focused, doesn't it? It's it's almost like in their death they're not alone. They're there's this.
Yeah, and a lot of these a lot of these are not grave sites are not something that everyone gets to visit, depending on where the person died. And so, to be honest, that's why there is sometimes such emotion around just the visit, is because that's their tombstone moment. That's their moment of being able to give witness that they were there.
And just so you can explain, because a lot of people don't know this about each of the pieces, like the size and the dimensions of them are really important.
Yeah, so they're each of the panels are 3 foot by 6 foot, and that was to mimic the size of a human grave, because at the time no funds or even attention was being given to the HIV/AIDS crisis, and the idea that Cleve had was, here's our dead, we lay at your feet. And so it was going to be, we laid it on the mall in Washington, so that no one could say this was not happening, and that was going to be a witness to the pandemic that was happening. And then those are then sewn, of course, together to form an entire block. And 12 foot by 12 foot is a precarious size. It's not something that can fit anywhere. And that was, again, also purposely, because they didn't want it to become a backdrop. They didn't want it to. They wanted it to, that it was going to have to give some space to it in order for it was not going to fit in your elementary school like hallway that could be tucked away somewhere. And so, yeah, those were the kind of like dynamics of it. They, in the very beginning, of course, fluidly, they thought, this is great. They had these walkways that, in order, if you can imagine, like panels laid on the ground, or blocks laid on the ground, and then some space, and then another block. Well, that space, if it was around grass and stuff, sometimes the grass would be kicked up, and so they said, okay, well, let's really make this a quilt, and let's attach this new fabric in between. The way we've kind of transitioned from that is because in the early days, we thought it'd be great to attach the fabric to the blocks to the walkway. We had some barrel winds that would come, and if you can imagine, would want to pick up and tidal wave the whole. I mean, if you imagine a huge piece of fabric as one piece being blown underneath, and they realized that that's not such a good idea for that attachment. So we've come at least to the point of we do walkway, but it's just not attached to our fabric, which is great. we added not added, but in the very beginning they came up with this lotus fold, which was a beautiful idea of taking 4 blocks, and because there's grommets on each side of the block, they attached the 4 of them together, and they're facing a way that you can, someone can walk up on one side, and at least one of those blocks will be facing you correctly. And then it's folded in a lotus fold, so corners are inside, quarters inside. And then part of the ceremony is when names began to be read of these individuals. Volunteers are at each of the points, and they very methodically bring these out. And then at the very last fold, they will all each lift their corner up to their chin, and then they do just a corner turn, and then it comes down. And so it adds a lot of fluidity to the process, and it almost kind of like you're giving life to the blocks when you kind of fluff them up, which is why they also kind of do this motion of allowing it to kind of bellow. And then it's purposely set at an odd quarter turn when they're all presented, but that's why when they do the quarter turn, it all kind of lays in perfectly. So
do you have video of people doing that?
Yeah.
That
It's
would be
really a
great to
beautiful
see.
part. Yeah, it is.
Now you get a lot of, you get obviously family members come, but you also get groups visiting, like classes, and I know there's I know from talking to Julie that there's lots of like Jewish groups, and can you talk about some of that?
Yeah, in fact, there's throughout the years recently there's Edgar 36 group, which is predominantly Jewish, between the ages of 13 and 17, and they do a bus tour, a civil rights bus tour. And so they're doing Selma. They'll come to Atlanta to do. They come to see us, the King Center, Jimmy Carter Library. They also go to an actual service on Sunday at Ebenezer. And so these are white, Jewish young kids that go see the real thing. They go to Ebenezer to see a predominantly black service, like Sunday service. And so they're given quite the experience as a whole. And so we gear, for instance, we've learned many times over, the quilt, if you can see yourself in the quilt, that's when it has the most impact. And so we gear some of the blocks that we're able to actually display or showcase when they come to visit, geared toward that. The age, geared towards the Jewish community, and it gives conversation to it. We do the same thing when we do displays, and we curate, between 400 and 600 displays a year, everywhere from a synagogue to a church to a university to all in between. We look at audiences that people are in the area, and then we use that to curate the blocks that go there.
So I have a question about that. So when you know that you're curating a piece, when you are deciding which pieces to use, does this come from your memory, or are you typing something in?
We have an immense database, and we have our display coordinators throughout the years, even our current one, of course. We have areas of the database that we're able to put notes in. And so if there is a military one, for instance, we can put in the notes, this is military. Then we can do search queries by that basis. That's the only way we'd be able to do 50,000.
You have to have a great memory.
Yeah, I know. And we yes, there are going to be those slated, 20 or so that we could recall in a second and tell you exactly what what's represented on them. But yeah, we have an immense, a huge database. I mean, it's massive. The part of the database that we're really excited about, or the possibility of making it even more robust, is this database is all the text surrounding, or all the when someone fills out when someone sends in a panel, they have this kind of panel maker card they fill out. It gives their information as well as a very, very select information about the person being remembered, their birth, death date, maybe importance of cities of importance, Miami or wherever they want the block to be seen. And that kind of data is in the database, and then when we send it on display, so it has a historical record. What it doesn't have, though, is if there's pink triangles on the face of it, or a bunch of bunny rabbits. So part of the kind of metadata that we're wanting to add to it is kind of more of a visual tag, so that we're able to even curate and to build curriculums around that kind of searchable data. That's coming. We're really excited about. That's something where we're crossing our fingers, partnering with Library of Congress and some other organizations to do that.
That's great. That's really great. And you've had so how young? So what, like, if students come to, do you have what's the youngest you get?
Well, because outside of the schools, it usually actually is the 12, the 13 to about 18 years old.
That would make sense.
The grandkids, and of course the kids that would get relative of the person enrolled. I had just even 2 weeks ago, I had a mother bringing in her 2 daughters because the uncle who he died before they were even born. But to hear the mother talk about, she wanted to show them exactly who this uncle was, and she didn't even make the panel, but she's able to show them why the person did a cactus, because they actually come from Arizona. But she was hearing her explain to her kids, that why Michael's panel was, it was another Michael, that why Michael's panel had a cactus on it, and why they did this fabric or whatever. So hearing that was very unique.
So how long do you need, how much notice do you need if somebody wants to see a panel?
We put out there, at least from the website, we asked for a month and a half, but honestly, displays we ship out like a week prior to the actual display date, and we can do a pull within just days. So honestly, it could be as short as 2 weeks, and we can make it happen. We've done it. We've done it on even a night before basis. But it just is a matter of it being at a warehouse, which isn't far. It's about 25 minutes out of Atlanta. And that the fact that the block is there, because we do displays, and we have a number of rotating displays, even at Robert Wood Johnson, where every 6 months we change out the block per location, so they'll have it.
Have you ever had an experience where somebody came to visit and they had they behaved poorly, or?
We've had requests for the panels where we've had where, and usually to be honest, we usually have Gert to make the call because she's really good about diffusing it. But I know that since I've been there, we've only had two where a relative and one was the mother, where the panel was made by someone else, by either their partner or someone that they didn't approve of making the panel. There's no clearance. They don't have to get, anyone can make a panel. In fact, we have panels that have multiple because the biological family makes one. But if the person moved out when they were 17, moved away, lived an entire, 20 or something years, they have their family that makes a panel, totally different panels. So we have no lines in regards to having multiple panels. But yeah, so they requested, they wanted the panel back. They wanted to take possession of it. And so that will never happen. We've had, years and years ago, we had one where they were making such a stink out of it that they wanted the panel back, that the only thing we agreed to is what we did was we got a piece of white cloth and we covered the last name because it had the person's first and last name. And she was just afraid that was going to cause, whatever the repercussions of or the stigma around it. So we agreed, and so we did just sew a piece of fabric over the last name. But I will say, to my delight, I've had more people now who, when they made these panels way back in the day, even in the 80s and early 90s, there was such stigma that they really were. We get many panels with just a single name on it, no last name. It's been such a delight where the people now have called and actually have been adding the last name to these because they want their. It's been really awesome, and the whole idea of that circle is really amazing. Just for them to say, and sometimes it's even around the grandmother finally dies, or the mother dies, and they're finally like, I know my brother, he would want his last name on here. My mom, she had an issue with this, but she's dead, so I want the last name on there. So we, when we can understand the circumstances around it, we definitely will make things like that happen.
That's great.
Yeah.
How has working with, this is a very intense sort of memorial to work with.
Yeah.
How, but also incredibly worthwhile. How has it impacted you personally?
I do a lot of volunteering. Like I really was kind of drawn towards like Meals on Wheels and Open Hand because of their the clients. So I vigorously volunteer with them. Any hours I can give to them, I give them. And knowing, it's funny, the involvement I get sometimes with those families that I, like I have a mother who she will call me, they have my cell phone, she'll call me, like for instance, before the AIDS walk, local AIDS walk, because she wants to talk to me, because we haven't talked in a while, but also because she wants me to give her personal details about where exactly it's going to be this year, what hours, and stuff like, she always asks, did she want me to bring, one time she came and my face was red from the sun, and so she's always asked, did she want me to bring, she'll bring me some cream or whatever to keep some block. But she always brings a dozen yellow roses for her son, and then she goes as far as bringing a vase, because normally she would lay them on the panel, and that's totally fine. We know to scoop them up at the end, and we just decided, we've been talking to her, that she would like for people to enjoy them, and so we always have a table there, and so she brings she'll bring the vase and the flowers, and so we're able to set it up on our table, and we always have them there. And so, and then I pull a chair out by the panel, because she's elderly, so that she can sit there, and bypassers will get the story of her son, so she's able to sit there. And so that I make that happen every single year now. In fact, to digress, she's the one with the steak story. Well, she was rich. She brought her son home to die, and she had bought steaks. They were going to have the steaks the very next night, and then he died. So, and she's a loving woman, and she brings her grandchildren, and they'll come and sit in her lap, and then the grandchildren hear her tell the stories of her son, and
it's a much more positive, living way to celebrate someone's life than just sitting by a grave.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. A lot of people's first notion when they either find out what I do, or they shake their heads, like, because they think I'm happy to be around that all the time, kind of stuff. But I because of the conversations and the stories and to see again some of the full circles of seeing these delighted grandchildren that are going to be so smart when I grow up, and to appreciate their gay uncle.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So you said some people are like, oh, that's what you do. Do you ever get anybody who is like, that's a terrible thing that you're doing? Like,
no, never. Some of them don't understand maybe material culture in a way that they can kind of look at it as how effective is it. They really want to empirical data kind of numbers, and that's what they want. For us, if there's an Achilles heel, when we do a display in Savannah, or if we do a display in a city, there's nothing in our testing or that we can say like more people were tested, because of it, or were they more aware? Now they're aware of it. Is to change their concept of getting tested. We don't know this kind of stuff, and so we have to be all right with what we're doing. We have to be all right with the impact or whatever that we can have, and the stories shared, and the fact that these same posts are very excited about, because they get to hear the stories, I mean, more so than even we do, but the hosts that do it all the time, and they do it all the time, and they're happy to be able to display the quilt. So we know it has some impact, and so I've had one friend that we've had quite a debate because he wanted to know data. He wanted to do you know how many people who were tested because they saw the quilt, and that's just not something we would have the capabilities of finding out if that's So, but no, outside of that, no, most people just are like, wow, so you're around. They're just amazed that the way I talk about it, and yet it's death. They're just like, you're around this all the time. I mean, I can't imagine it being and I will say there's times when I'm reading story, like for instance, each year we do a calendar, and part of the real the work is reading the stories of these panels. And so I will say, yes, there's times when I have found myself, maybe it's just maybe there's just story after story sometimes in a group that will put me in a little bit of a mental solemnness or whatever that I have to kind of break out of.
How do you deal with that?
Well, usually I have hobbies. Like as corny as it may sound, I do like some of these really like adult coloring books and stuff that I can.
Agree.
Okay,
it's okay. That's good.
Yeah, totally. Well, it's just something I could be brainless or whatever, and I can feel it flow. It makes things can flow, and so I do stuff like that. I'm on a bowling league, so I bowl. Again, it's completely outside of story, and so yeah, those kind of things. I've learned how healthy it is for me to do that, because at first I was, so bent on wanting my extra time, really trying to figure certain things out with the quilt and our expansion and our reach and all these kind of like mission and goals. But I realized it was bogging me down, and so I wasn't as creative as I could be. So learning that years ago, I figured out little ways I can get around it, which are not doing anything that's, like I said, coloring books, whatever the adult coloring books.
Yeah, self-care is really important.
Yeah.
Now, you moved recently from the big warehouse into a smaller storefront with a warehouse.
Yep.
Yeah, and a separate warehouse.
Yep.
How's that been for you?
The space is beautiful. Because of the expense of having the office and the warehouse together, to be able to afford the rent, it can be challenging to find a place that's somewhat close to downtown, because that's where activity is, as well as having to store this 54.5 tons of quilt. So we were able to find a beautiful storefront, blueprints downtown, lots of foot traffic and lots of...
What's the address?
117 Lucky Street. And then we have a warehouse that's 25 minutes out. The storefront is fantastic for the panel makers who are just simply traveling. And we've had some that just have a layover in the airport, and literally maybe a day layover. They know that we're downtown, so they'll say, hey, this block so-and-so available, I'd love to come by and see it. So of course, because we only live 8 or 10 minutes away from Lucky Street, or at least I do, I make myself available to go and open that place and have it available for them to see, because knowing that sometimes it is just a travel through Atlanta kind of situation. But yeah, we know we love it. Love it.
And it's much closer to MARTA, like MARTA train stations, that you can just walk through.
And because we also are dependent on volunteers, we have Georgia State and a number of other universities in this area that, because of sometimes their freshman programs, they have it kind of an intro to service, a day of services in each one of these colleges. And so we're really lucky to have all of a sudden 30 volunteers on a day that can really help us with the care of the quilt, because all the displays of blocks of quilts, when they come back, we actually have to hand inspect them. And also if it's outside, the idea of dirt or debris being stuck to them. So we have this very physical thing of having to shake each one and making sure nothing falls off, because the stuff that's on it. And so then it has to be refolded in a very particular way.
Let's talk just for a minute about the very act of like something that is being kept as a memorial object, but it's also being used. It's like, that's a really unusual combination.
Really, we were deemed an American treasure in 2006. We got a grant, and part of the grant was a archivist, a conservationist from DC was contracted, and she was to come and kind of give us a once-over, tell us best practices, stuff we're doing that's not so good. We've always had the challenge of, anything dealing with gallery or museum means behind glass, means not usable. It's not going to be used. And the whole idea is that we want to make it comfortable for people to, even when we show people how to display the quilt, it's more about being able to be touched, be looked upon, as opposed to stanchions, keeping far away from people. And so, yeah, the idea, and so she came and gave us she understood, knowing that that's from the get-go, she gave us the pointers of, like ways of handling it, of cleaning it, because there's lots of details on these things. You can't just get a vacuum or a roller and fix it. So she was describing, doing the muslin over the vacuum ends, and she really was giving us really detailed ways of protecting the pieces. And so that's the kind of the best practices we got from her. But yeah, it's a paradox in terms of the whole thing.
But it has to be seen and touched to make the impact that it's meant to make.
Completely, yeah. Believe me. When you hear the weight, of them, when you hear yes, some of them have T-shirts, lots of photographs. You don't get to experience the looking at it and you say, my God, someone just sewed every single one of these, or look, these are the kids, and these are there's so much detail that really has the story to it.
Yeah, there's almost like it's a form of activism just to show it.
Yeah,
to put it in a public space, because it's you can't look away from it.
Yep, and people are they are quick to help us even on site when we do big displays. When we kind of describe to them what we need as far as just a body to help fold it and to care for it and lift it and to unfold it in certain ways. The public's always good to really jump in and help. We're lucky in that way because it really is on site.
Yeah.
It's very on site volunteers.
How often do you have to go off site to set things up?
Well, we do locally. We have our two big ones. We have the largest collegiate one at Emory. That's our largest World AIDS Day, December 1st. Every single year, we do over 100, sometimes 150 blocks on the campuses of Emory and the Quad and all over the campus. And then for locally here, we do the AIDS Walk and the Atlanta Pride. And that kind of same segment of audience and event is replicated throughout the 50 states at certain times. So there's certain states that, or certain organizations that will only do